My mom threw away the food I gave her because she didn't want to look poor. So, I never thought I'd be writing something like this. But here I am, still trying to process what happened last week. I 29F have been helping my mom 56F a lot lately, since she's been struggling financially. I grew up in a middle-class home, but after my dad passed about 4 years ago, my mom's life kind of fell apart. She lost the house, started renting a small apartment, and picked up a part-time job at a pharmacy. I've always tried to be supportive. I pay her phone bill, sometimes send her grocery money, and bring her cooked meals whenever I visit. My mom has always been obsessed with appearances. She grew up in a small Texas town where keeping up with the neighbors was practically a sport. Even when money was tight, she'd rather buy a name-brand purse than fill the fridge. I used to think it was a generational thing. Like she just couldn't let go of that old-fashioned pride. But what happened this time really opened my eyes. Last weekend, I dropped by her apartment with a few containers of homemade food. I made chicken and rice, vegetable soup, and a few pasta dishes. Nothing fancy, but hearty, healthy stuff, I told her. "Mom, I made extra, so you don't have to cook this week." She smiled, thanked me, and put everything in the fridge. She even hugged me and said, "You're such a good daughter." It felt nice. The next morning, I stopped by again because I'd accidentally left my wallet in her car. When I got to her place, the trash bin outside was full, like overflowing full, and I noticed a weird smell. I peeked in, I know, gross, but something felt off, and there it was. Every single container I'd given her, dumped out into the trash. Perfectly good food, just thrown away. I froze. For a second, I thought maybe it had gone bad or something spilled, but the containers were cleanly scraped out. She had literally dumped them on purpose. I went inside, trying not to lose my temper. She was sitting at the table drinking coffee, scrolling on her phone. I said, "Mom, did you throw away the food I brought yesterday?" She didn't even look embarrassed. She just sighed and said, "Honey, don't make a big deal out of it. I don't want my neighbors to see me eating out of plastic containers. It looks cheap." I swear my brain short-circuited. I said, "What does that even mean? You live alone. Who's gonna see you eating?" She shrugged and said, "You never know. People stop by sometimes. I don't want anyone thinking I can't afford to cook or that I'm taking handouts." At that point, I felt this mix of anger and sadness. I told her, "Mom, I wasn't giving you handouts. I was just trying to help." And she said, "I didn't ask for your help." I'm not some charity case. That stung. Badly, I stood there, trying not to cry, while she went on about maintaining dignity and how her generation didn't depend on others. The irony is that I've been quietly helping her for years. Paying bills she doesn't know I cover automatically through my account. Fixing her car. Even buying her new clothes and pretending they were returns from work. It hit me that she would rather starve than admit she needs help. Or worse, accept it from her own daughter. I told her, "I'm done, Mom. I can't keep pretending like everything's fine when you keep rejecting everything I do." She didn't even respond. Just said, "Do whatever you want, sweetie." Like I was overreacting. I left and didn't talk to her for 3 days. Then she texted me, "I hope you're not still mad. I was just raised differently." No apology. No acknowledgement. Just an excuse wrapped in pride. The thing is, I know she loves me. She's done a lot for me in her own way. But it's like she'd rather live a lie than accept genuine care. When I told my fiancé, he said, "She's embarrassed. You can't fix pride." And maybe he's right. But I keep thinking, what happens when she really needs me? When she can't work or pay rent? Will she still be too proud to take help then? I haven't gone back to her apartment since. I still send her money, though I've stopped labeling it. I just transfer it through Zelle as if it's a refund for something. It's sad that I have to trick my own mom into accepting support. I love her, but I can't stand watching her throw away kindness, literally and figuratively. Because she's afraid of looking poor. It's been eating at me all week. I don't even know how to bring it up again without it turning into another fight. Part of me wants to just let her be, let her learn the hard way. But another part feels like walking away completely would make me just like her. Pretending everything's fine when it's really not. I wish I could make her see that accepting love doesn't make her weak, but maybe that's something she'll never understand. Update, it's been about 3 weeks since that day, and honestly, I wasn't planning to update. I thought I'd just let things cool off, give my mom space and focus on my own life. But a lot happened since then. Enough that I feel like I'm living in some weird emotional tug-of-war between guilt and relief. After the whole food in the trash situation, I went no contact for a bit. I needed distance. I didn't block her, but I muted her texts and told myself I wouldn't reach out unless she did first. The first week, nothing. The second week, she started sending short messages. Pictures of her garden, the dog she sometimes pets it. Random chain messages about strong mothers raising strong daughters. I didn't reply to any of them. I was still too angry. And honestly, I wanted her to feel that silence. Then last Sunday, my fiancé, Aaron, and I were at brunch when my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but when I answered, it was my mom's neighbor, Mrs. Jacobs. She said, "Honey, your mom isn't feeling well. She's been dizzy and hasn't eaten much. I think she's embarrassed to call you." My stomach dropped. We rushed over. When I got there, my mom was sitting on the couch. Pale and shaky, I asked when she last ate, and she mumbled something about not being hungry. I opened her fridge. It was nearly empty except for some expired milk, mustard, and a few bottles of flavored water. That's it. It hit me again, like a punch to the gut. She had literally starved herself rather than admit she needed help. I cooked her something right away. Scrambled eggs and toast. Simple stuff. She hesitated before eating, and when she finally took a few bites, she started tearing up. She said, "I didn't want you to see me like this." That was the first time I'd seen her cry in years. I sat down next to her and told her straight up, "Mom, you need to stop doing this pride thing. It's going to kill you." She started apologizing, quietly, softly, like she was ashamed. She said, "I've spent my whole life trying to look like I have it together. Your father always said, no one needs to know our struggles." I guess I never unlearned that. Hearing her say that broke something in me. I realized she wasn't just being stubborn. She was living out habits that had been drilled into her for decades. My dad was old school, the kind of man who'd rather take out a second mortgage than admit he couldn't afford something. I guess that rubbed off on her harder than I thought. We talked for a long time that night. She admitted she's been skipping meals to stretch her money and pretending she's fine to friends because no one likes a pity story. I told her I didn't care what her friends thought. I just wanted her to stop pretending. She nodded and said, "I don't want to be a burden." That line, a burden, just destroyed me. Because she's not, I told her, "Mom, you're my family. Taking care of you isn't a burden. Watching you refuse help is." Since then, I've been going over every couple of days, bringing groceries, cleaning up, making sure she's eating. She's been better. Still awkward about accepting things, but she doesn't throw them away anymore. I even caught her reheating the soup I made 2 days ago, which honestly felt like a small miracle. But here's where it gets complicated. Last night, I was putting away her mail while she was on the phone, and I noticed an envelope from a local credit company. I didn't open it, but I recognized the logo. It was a debt collection notice. My heart sank. When I gently asked her later if everything was okay financially, she brushed it off with her usual, "Don't worry about me." I pressed her a little, and she finally admitted she has about $7,000 in credit card debt, mostly from small things. I asked what small things meant, and she said, groceries, bills, and a few things I needed. I knew exactly what those few things were. She still buys herself luxury items once in a while because it makes her feel normal. It's like she's drowning, but refuses to let go of the heavy purse pulling her under. I offered to help her set up a budget, or even consolidate the debt, but she said no. She told me, "You've done enough." That phrase again. It always feels like a door slamming shut. I left that night feeling torn. On one hand, I can see she's trying. She's eating again, being a little more honest. On the other hand, it's like watching someone wrestle their own pride in slow motion, knowing you can't step in without setting them off. Aaron thinks I should draw a line, help her when she asks, but stop trying to fix everything. He says, "You can't save someone who won't let themselves be saved." And he's right. But she's my mom. How do you just not try? So here's where I'm at. I've set up automatic grocery deliveries to her address every week. Nothing fancy, just basic essentials. And I'm pretending it's part of a discount program through my work. She believes it, thankfully. It's ridiculous, but it's the only way she'll accept it. I'm also planning to talk to her about moving closer to me. I found a small apartment a few blocks from where Aaron and I live that she could afford if I cover part of the rent. I haven't told her that part yet. I'll probably have to disguise it as a special offer or something. I don't know where this ends. Maybe she'll never fully change. Maybe I'll always have to play this weird game of pretending I'm not helping her. But at least she's alive, she's eating, and she knows I love her. Even if she can't fully accept it yet. And honestly, for now, that's enough. Final update. It's been about 4 months since everything with my mom came to a head, and I can honestly say this has been one of the hardest, most emotionally confusing stretches of my life. I didn't expect things to shift the way they did, for better and worse. But here we are. After my last post, I started making the grocery deliveries a regular thing, still under the lie that it was some employee perk from my job. Every week, she'd text me a photo of the box on her porch, along with a little note like, "They sent too many apples again," or, "Who eats this much pasta?" It became our weird, unspoken truce. She didn't have to admit she needed help, and I didn't have to watch her starve. About a month in, she started sounding lighter on the phone. Still a little guarded. But she'd tell me about her day, her garden, the neighbor's cat that keeps sleeping on her porch. Small talk, but it felt like progress. I tried to be patient and let her come around on her own terms. Then, something unexpected happened. One afternoon she called and said, "Sweetheart, I signed up for a cooking class at the community center." I was honestly stunned, she said. "It's free, but you know, they teach recipes that make things stretch further." That might not sound like a big deal, but for her, someone who used to throw out my home-cooked meals out of pride, that was huge. When I went over later that week, she actually made dinner for us, just spaghetti and salad, but she was so proud of it. We sat there, eating and laughing, and for the first time in years, it felt like we were just mother and daughter again. Not caretaker and dependent. But then, life being what it is, the calm didn't last long. In late September, she had a minor health scare. Nothing too serious. A fainting episode while running errands. The doctor said it was likely from stress and poor nutrition catching up over time. I spent that night with her in the ER, and when she dozed off, I looked at her. The woman who raised me, who used to be so strong and commanding. And I saw how fragile she's become. It scared me more than I'll ever admit to her. The next morning, the doctor gently told me that she's not getting enough consistent nutrition, and that the stress of living alone and managing everything might be too much for her. When I brought it up to her, she got defensive again. "I'm fine. They exaggerate. I've just been tired." But I knew better. That week I told her about the apartment near me. I didn't say I'd pay for it. I framed it as a great deal for seniors. At first, she resisted, saying she liked her place, her neighbors, her independence. But after the fainting spell, I think something in her cracked a little. She said, Maybe it would be nice to be closer to you." That's all I needed to hear. It took some convincing, a little paperwork, and a lot of emotional negotiation, but she finally moved in 2 weeks ago. She now lives about a 10-minute walk from me and Aaron. She brought only her essentials, some furniture, her photo albums, and that one ugly floral couch she refuses to part with. We helped her settle in, and she actually thanked us, sincerely. No pride, no deflection, just, "Thank you. I know I've been hard to help." That's the first time she's ever said something like that in my entire life. The night she moved in, she handed me a folded piece of paper. Inside was a handwritten note that said, "I've always been proud of you. I just didn't want you to see me as weak. But I see now that letting you in isn't weakness. It's love." I cried so hard I could barely breathe. I think in that moment, all the years of frustration, resentment, and guilt finally broke open. She hugged me, really hugged me, and whispered, "I'm sorry for wasting so much food, time, and love." Since then, things have been calmer. We have dinner together twice a week. Sometimes she cooks, sometimes I do. She still gets embarrassed when I buy her things, so I compromise by saying it's from both of us. She joined a walking group in the neighborhood and even made a few friends her age. She jokes now, saying, "They think I'm the young one." We're still working through a lot. Her pride didn't vanish overnight. It probably never will. She still tries to insist on paying for dinner even when I know she can't afford it. But the difference is now I can say, "Mom, just let me." And she actually does. No fight, no guilt trip, just acceptance. And here's the part that surprised me most. Helping her finally helped me too. I spent years carrying around resentment, thinking she didn't appreciate me, that her pride was rejection. But I've realized that her behavior wasn't about me. It was about fear. Of aging. Of losing control. Of being seen as someone who needed saving. It took her almost 60 years to unlearn that shame. But she's trying, and that's all I could ever ask for. Last Sunday, while we were cleaning up after dinner, she looked at me and said, "You know, when I threw away your food, it wasn't because I didn't appreciate it. It was because I didn't want to face what it meant. That I needed my daughter's help. That was too much for me then. But I'm glad you didn't give up on me." I didn't even have words. I just hugged her again. I guess that's the ending to all this. Not some perfect, tied-up story, but a quiet understanding. My mom's learning to accept love, and I'm learning to give it without expecting perfection in return. We're both growing up, in our own ways. And this time, when I brought her leftovers after our Sunday dinner, she packed them neatly into her fridge. Then she smiled at me and said, "Don't worry, honey, I'm not throwing this away." For once, I actually believed her. Stories number 2. My sister-in-law asked me to dress differently around her husband, and I finally pushed back. I never thought I'd end up in this kind of weird family drama. I've always tried to be polite, respectful, and not rock the boat, especially when it comes to my husband's family. But lately, I've been wondering if I've been too accommodating. So, I'm 29, and I've been married to my husband. Jake, 31, for about 3 years. His brother, Ryan, 33, is married to his wife, Megan, 30. On paper, Megan and I should get along great. We're close in age, both work from home, and we see each other at least twice a month for family dinners, birthdays, or just casual hangouts. But from the start, Megan has always been a little intense. She's not outright rude, but she makes these subtle comments that make me second-guess myself. Things like, "Wow, I could never wear something like that," or "You're brave for posting that picture." Always with that sugary tone that sounds nice on the surface, but you can feel the sting underneath. For context, I'm a fitness instructor. I live in leggings and sports bras most of the time because that's literally my work attire. Even outside the gym, I tend to dress casually. Crop tops, shorts, tank tops, nothing scandalous, just comfortable. A couple months ago, we all went to a barbecue at Jake's parents' house. It was in July, like 95 degrees out. I wore denim shorts and a loose white tank. Nothing crazy. But later that evening, Jake told me Megan had said something to him privately. She apparently told him that my outfits are inappropriate for family gatherings, and that Ryan feels awkward when I dress that way. I laughed at first because I thought he was joking. He wasn't. Jake looked uncomfortable. Said he didn't agree with her, but thought I should know. I rolled my eyes and brushed it off. Whatever, not worth a fight. But then it started escalating. Every time we saw them, Megan would make some comment or passive-aggressive joke about what I was wearing. Once, I had on a black sundress that hit above my knees, and she said, "That's cute, but I'd never wear that around other men. It sends the wrong message." Jake told me to ignore her, and I did for a while. But the real issue started a few weeks ago when his parents planned a weekend getaway at their lake house. Everyone was invited. Me, Jake, his parents, Ryan, and Megan. On the first day, we went out on the boat. I wore a 2-piece swimsuit with a light cover-up, just normal lake attire. Megan didn't swim. Instead, she sat under the umbrella and spent half the time glaring at me. I tried to be friendly, offered her a drink, but she brushed me off. That night, after dinner, she cornered me in the kitchen while everyone else was outside by the fire. She said, "Can I talk to you privately?" I said sure. Then she said, "I'm going to be honest. Ryan and I both feel uncomfortable with the way you dress around him. You're very revealing sometimes. I don't think you realize how it makes people feel." I was stunned. I asked, "Are you saying I make your husband uncomfortable by existing in my body?" She looked flustered and said, "No, that's not what I mean, but you could be more respectful. You don't have to show so much skin, especially around family." I told her, "Megan, I'm not going to dress for your husband's comfort. That's his problem. Not mine. She immediately got defensive, saying, I knew you'd get all feminist about this. I'm just asking for some basic decency. At that point, I was done, I told her. If Ryan can't control his eyes, that's on him. I'm not responsible for your marriage or his self-control. I dress appropriately for the situation, and if that bothers you, maybe you should talk to him. Not me. Then I walked out before I said something I'd regret. Later that night, Jake told me that Ryan and Megan had complained to his parents, saying I was disrespectful and rude. His mom texted me the next day asking if I could try to keep the peace because she didn't want unnecessary tension. That really upset me because now I felt like I was being blamed for their insecurity. Jake completely backed me up, which I appreciated. He even talked to his parents and told them I hadn't done anything wrong. But it's still awkward because now family events feel tense. The next time we saw them, at Jake's mom's birthday, I decided to wear exactly what I wanted, jeans and a cropped sweater. Not even revealing, just something I liked. Megan looked me up and down, rolled her eyes, and whispered something to Ryan. That's when I finally said something in front of everyone. I said, if you have something to say about my outfit, Megan, you can just say it out loud. Everyone got quiet. She looked caught off guard and said, I didn't say anything. I smiled and said, good. Because I'm tired of pretending like your comments don't bother me. I'm done making myself small to make you comfortable. Jake's mom quickly changed the subject, but Megan didn't say another word to me for the rest of the night. Since then, she's been distant. And honestly, I don't mind. Ryan still acts normal, maybe even a little embarrassed. Jake says Megan's just mad I stood up to her and that I shouldn't feel guilty. But a small part of me wonders if I could have handled it differently. I don't want to cause drama, but I also refuse to let someone police what I wear, just because their husband can't act like a grown adult. I've replayed that kitchen conversation a dozen times, and every time, I still can't believe the audacity, like, how do you tell another woman to change how she dresses for your man's comfort? It's not my job to manage someone else's insecurities. Now, family events are quieter, less friendly, but I can breathe again. I've decided that I'll keep being polite but distant. I'll wear what I want, speak when I want, and stop apologizing for existing. If Megan or Ryan can't handle that, it's not my problem anymore. Update: it's been about 4 months since that last family dinner, when I finally told Megan I wasn't going to dress for her husband's comfort. For a while, things were oddly calm. No group hangouts, no calls from his parents, just silence. Honestly, it was nice. Jake and I got to live in our own little bubble without the constant side-eye or awkward tension hanging over every family meal. But calm never lasts long in this family. It all started again with Jake's mom's birthday planning. She wanted to do something intimate and cozy at their house, meaning both sons, both wives, and her famous pot roast that she makes twice a year. When Jake told me, I groaned. I didn't want to see Megan, but I also didn't want to give her the satisfaction of thinking she'd chased me away. I decided to go. I told Jake I'd be polite, stay in my lane, and not engage if she started anything. Famous last words, the day of the dinner. I wore a plain blue dress that hit mid-calf, no cleavage, no shoulders, nothing that could possibly be labeled as revealing. I wanted to make it painfully clear that I wasn't doing anything wrong. When we arrived, Megan gave me the fakest smile I've ever seen. The kind of smile that says, I'm pretending to be polite because other people are watching. We sat down to dinner and for a while things were actually fine. Small talk, laughs, clinking silverware. Then Ryan brought up something that would light the match. He said, Hey Jake, remember that lake trip? We should plan another one next summer. Before Jake could even answer, Megan said, Yeah, maybe if everyone can agree to keep things family-friendly this time. The whole table went silent. Jake looked confused. What does that mean? Megan shrugged with a little smirk. I just mean it would be nice if everyone dressed appropriately this time. We have kids there sometimes, and it should be about family. Not showing off. I felt my stomach twist. Jake immediately said, You're talking about my wife, right? Just say it if you are. Megan's eyes flicked to me, then she said, Well, if the shoe fits. Jake's mom tried to smooth it over by saying, Let's not start this again. But it was too late. I was done sitting there silently. I said, You know what's funny, Megan? You keep talking about family-friendly clothes, but no one in this family has ever complained about what I wear, except you. So maybe the issue isn't my outfit. Maybe it's you. Ryan immediately said, Okay, that's enough. But Jake jumped in and said, No, it's not enough. She's been taking shots at my wife for months, and it's exhausting. You could feel the air in the room get heavy. Megan crossed her arms and said, "I'm just saying it's uncomfortable for everyone." Jake's dad spoke for the first time, saying, "Everyone? Or just you, Megan?" I nearly choked trying not to laugh because that man has never taken sides in his life. Megan looked blindsided. She turned to him saying, "I'm not the only one who thinks so." Jake's mom quickly said, "I don't have an issue with how anyone dresses, dear." And Ryan just stared down at his plate like he wanted to disappear. It was so awkward it almost felt scripted. Megan stood up suddenly and said, "I'm not going to sit here and be attacked," and then stormed out of the dining room. Ryan followed her without a word. The rest of us sat there in silence for a good 30 seconds before Jake's dad muttered, "Well, that was unnecessary," and went back to eating. After they left, Jake's mom apologized to me, which I appreciated, but I could tell she still wished we'd just let it go. I told her I didn't start it and that I'd been trying to avoid conflict for months. Jake and I left shortly after that, and in the car, he said, "I think that's the last time we do family dinners for a while." I didn't argue. 2 days later, Megan sent me a text. It said, "I didn't mean to upset you at dinner, but you've made me feel really uncomfortable for a long time. I just wish you'd take my feelings into account." I stared at it for a long time before replying, "Your feelings are valid, but they're yours to manage. I've never disrespected you or Ryan. If my clothes bother you, maybe you should look into why." She didn't reply. A week later, Jake got a call from Ryan. He said Megan was still upset and thought I owed her an apology. Jake laughed and told him, "Not happening. She doesn't owe anyone an apology for existing in her own skin." That was apparently the breaking point because Megan unfollowed both of us on social media and started avoiding every family function. Ryan still shows up to some events, but always alone, and honestly, he looks miserable. About a month later, Jake's mom told me Megan's been telling extended family members that I humiliated her publicly and that I have no respect for marriage boundaries. Apparently, she spun this narrative that I intentionally flirt with Ryan or wear things to tempt him. At that point, I was more angry than hurt, I told Jake's mom. Anyone who believes that clearly doesn't know me. Jake's parents have been kind of walking on eggshells since then, but they've made it clear they're on our side. His mom even admitted privately that Megan has a habit of making other women the enemy when she feels insecure. The thing is, I actually don't hate Megan. I think she's insecure. And maybe Ryan has done things in the past to make her feel that way. But instead of addressing that with him, she projected it onto me. It's sad, really. Still, I'm not her therapist. I tried to be understanding at first. But there's a line between setting boundaries and controlling other people. She crossed it. Since all that, Jake and I have been happier. I no longer feel anxious before family events. Because if Megan shows up, I know exactly how to handle it. With calm indifference, if she makes a comment. I either ignore her or respond in a way that puts the spotlight back on her behavior. The last time I saw her, at Jake's dad's retirement party, she barely looked at me. I wore a black jumpsuit, classy but form-fitting. I caught her glancing once. Then quickly looking away, I didn't say a word. That silence felt like victory. I've realized that standing up for yourself doesn't always look like a big argument or perfect clapback. Sometimes it's just refusing to shrink. Refusing to let someone's insecurities dictate how you exist in your own skin. I know I probably won't ever have a warm, sisterly relationship with Megan, but that's okay. I've accepted that. What I won't accept is being made to feel guilty for being confident, for liking my body, or for not apologizing for existing. Jake says I handled it perfectly, and honestly, I think I finally believe him. The peace I've had since setting that boundary has been worth every ounce of awkwardness that came after. Final update. It's been almost a full year since the dinner where everything blew up between Megan and me. I didn't plan on writing another update, but a few things have happened that made me realize how much has changed. How much I've changed, too. After that chaotic dinner and the months of tension, Jake and I really pulled back from family events. Not out of spite, but out of peace. We still saw his parents every now and then. Just the four of us. They'd come over for dinner, or we'd meet them for brunch somewhere quiet. No drama. No passive-aggressive comments. No tension hanging over every bite. It was peaceful. For a while, I didn't hear anything about Ryan or Megan. I assumed they were just keeping to themselves. I'd see little glimpses of their lives through family group texts or photos Jake's mom would share. Megan posting self-care weekends or long captions about boundaries and protecting your peace. I'd scroll past without thinking much about it. Then, about 3 months ago, Jake got a call from Ryan. Apparently, Ryan and Megan were going through a rough patch. They'd started marriage counseling and things were tense. Ryan told Jake that Megan was still hung up on me, on what I wore, what I said, how I embarrassed her. He said their counselor even brought me up once because Megan had framed me as this trigger for her anxiety. I didn't know whether to laugh or feel bad. I mean, I never set out to be anyone's villain, but she'd made me into one in her head. Jake told Ryan, "Man, you two have to deal with your stuff. My wife isn't the problem here." And that was that, or so I thought, a few weeks later. Jake's mom called me and said Megan wanted to apologize. She said their therapist had apparently helped Megan realize that a lot of her issues weren't really about me. They were about her marriage, her body image, and a long history of insecurity she'd never addressed. At first, I wasn't sure I wanted to hear her out. It wasn't about holding a grudge. I just didn't trust her motives. But Jake said maybe hearing her out could help close the book completely. So I agreed. We met for coffee at this quiet cafe downtown. I remember walking in and seeing her already there, sitting stiffly at a corner table with her hands wrapped around a mug like she was holding it for dear life. She looked tired, not physically but emotionally. When I sat down, she gave me this small, awkward smile and said, "Thanks for meeting me," I said. "Sure," and waited for her to speak first. She took a deep breath and said, "I owe you a huge apology. I've been really unfair to you for a long time." She explained that her insecurities started long before I ever entered the picture, that she'd always compared herself to other women. And after she had some health issues that made her gain weight, she felt invisible to Ryan. Seeing me, someone who's confident in her body and doesn't hide it, apparently brought all that to the surface. She admitted that she'd projected all her resentment and fear onto me because it was easier than facing what was really wrong in her marriage. She said, "You didn't do anything wrong. I twisted things in my head and I made you into the enemy. I'm really sorry. I'll be honest. I didn't expect her to own it like that." I'd prepared myself for one of those half apologies people give just to make themselves feel better. But she was genuinely remorseful. She even said she'd told her therapist she wanted to reach out, not to fix the friendship, but to take accountability. I told her, "I appreciate you saying that. I really do. I don't hold a grudge. But I had to step back because it became too much." She nodded and said, "I get that. I would have stepped back too." We sat there for over an hour, just talking. About life, about how messy marriage can be, about the weird ways insecurity creeps in. She even laughed a few times, which honestly felt surreal after all the tension. Before we left, she said, "I don't expect us to be close, but I hope someday it won't feel weird when we're in the same room." I told her I'd like that too. After that meeting, things shifted. Not in a "we're best friends again" way. More like we're two adults who finally found neutral ground. At the next family gathering, she was actually pleasant, polite, calm, no weird digs. She complimented my earrings, made small talk, didn't mention clothes once. It was a little awkward, sure, but peaceful. Ryan looked relieved. Jake did too. That night, Jake told me, "I'm proud of you for how you handled that." Most people wouldn't have met her halfway, I told him. It wasn't about her, it was for me, and it's true. Forgiving her wasn't about excusing what she did. It was about releasing the hold it had over me. I didn't realize how much tension I'd been carrying until it was gone. Now, things feel normal again. I don't think Megan and I will ever be super close. But there's mutual respect now. She even texted me a few weeks ago asking for recommendations for a yoga class. That small gesture meant more than I expected. It was her way of saying, "I trust you again," even if we'll never say it out loud. Ryan and Megan are apparently doing better in therapy. They still have work to do, but from what Jake's mom says, they're actually communicating for once. And I genuinely hope they keep working on it. As for me, I've learned something I wish I'd understood years ago. Sometimes people's reactions to you have absolutely nothing to do with you. You can bend, shrink, or apologize all you want, but if someone's determined to see you as a threat, they will, until they decide to face what's really going on inside themselves. I don't regret standing up for myself. I don't regret pushing back or calling out the double standards, or refusing to be silent just to keep the peace. Because peace built on silence isn't peace, it's performance. Now, when I go to family events, I show up as myself, unapologetically. If that makes anyone uncomfortable, that's not my problem anymore. And funny enough, since all of this, I've realized that Megan's opinion doesn't even cross my mind anymore. It's like once I stopped letting her energy take up space in my head, She stopped having power over me. Life feels lighter now. And if there's one thing I've learned from this whole messy, dramatic situation, it's this. Sometimes standing your ground doesn't just protect your peace. It teaches everyone around you what self-respect actually looks like. Stories number 3. My daughter keeps talking to the glass lady in our bathroom mirror, and I just found out what she means. When my daughter Lily turned 5, she started doing this strange little ritual before bed. She'd stand on her tiptoes in front of the bathroom mirror, wave and whisper, "Good night, glass lady." At first, I thought it was adorable. One of those quirky things kids do when they're figuring out the world. I even joked with my husband, Ryan, that maybe we had a friendly ghost roommate. He rolled his eyes and said, "She's just talking to her reflection. You used to do that when you were a kid." But it didn't stop there. Every night Lily would whisper to the mirror, like she was having an actual conversation. Sometimes she'd laugh softly or nod, like she was listening to someone. Other times I'd hear her say, "No, that's a secret," or "Mommy can't come in right now." That last one sent a chill through me the first time I heard it. I tried asking her who the glass lady was, and she said, "She's the lady who lives in the shiny door. She talks to me when I brush my teeth." I asked what they talked about, and Lily said, "She tells me about her daughter who got lost. She says I remind her of her." Now this is the kind of thing that makes every parent pause. I wanted to laugh it off, but the look on Lily's face was so serious. She wasn't making it up for attention. She really believed it. A few days later, I mentioned it to Ryan again. He still didn't think it was a big deal. "Kids imagine things, that's normal," he said. "Don't make it into something spooky." But the next night, when I walked past the bathroom and heard Lily whispering again, I decided to record it on my phone. I didn't want to scare her. So I stood just outside the doorway, phone in hand, listening. Her voice was quiet but clear. "I can't stay long," she said. Pause. "I know you miss her." Pause. "I can tell, Mommy. But you said not to." My heart sank. When she came out, I asked, "Hey, who were you talking to?" She blinked up at me, innocent as ever. "The glass lady. She said you used to see her too." I froze. "What do you mean?" "She said you saw her when you were little, in Grandma's old house. She said you forgot." That night I didn't sleep. I hadn't thought about Grandma's house in years. It was this old Victorian place in upstate New York that always felt heavy. Like the air itself remembered things. I used to dream about a woman standing in the hallway mirror there. Dark hair, pale face, a blue nightgown, I'd told my mom once, and she'd brushed it off as a nightmare. So when Lily mentioned it, I felt something in my stomach drop. The next morning, while Lily was at preschool, I decided to check the mirror. It's an old one. Came with the house when we bought it, a big, framed piece with tiny floral etching along the edges. I'd always liked it. I wiped it down, looking for anything, smudges, cracks, reflections that didn't match, nothing. That night, though, something happened that I still don't know how to explain. Around 2 a.m., I heard Lily's voice. She was talking quietly again. I got up and went down the hall, assuming she'd had a nightmare. But when I reached the bathroom, the door was open just enough for me to see her standing there in the dark, facing the mirror. The night light from the hall barely lit her face. I whispered, "Lily, honey, what are you doing?" She didn't look at me. She just said, "She says her name is Margaret." The name made my stomach twist. That was my grandmother's middle name. I stepped closer. "Lily, sweetheart, come here." But she didn't move. Her reflection didn't move either, I swear to God. Her reflection stayed still when she turned toward me. Just for a second, but I saw it. I grabbed her, pulled her close, and turned her away from the mirror. When I looked again, it was just our reflections. Both normal. I told myself I was imagining it. Sleep deprivation, shadows. The next morning, Lily acted completely normal. Ate her cereal, watched cartoons. When I asked about the glass lady, she frowned and said, "She's sad today. She said her daughter doesn't visit anymore." I called my mom later that day. I didn't even tell her everything. Just asked if Grandma ever talked about someone named Margaret. There was silence on the other end before she said, "Why are you asking that?" I told her Lily had mentioned it. My mom sighed and said quietly, "That was Grandma's sister. She died when they were kids, drowned in the pond behind the house. Grandma wouldn't even have mirrors in her bedroom after that. I don't know what to do with that." That night, I took the mirror down. It's in the garage now, covered with a blanket. Lily cried when she saw it was gone. "The glass lady will be lonely," she said. I told her it was broken. She didn't believe me. For the last few weeks, Things have been quiet, no whispers, no late-night talking. But last night, I went into the garage to grab something, and I swear I heard humming coming from under the blanket. A soft, low tune, one I hadn't heard since I was a little girl falling asleep in Grandma's house. I haven't told Ryan, he wouldn't believe me, but I know what I heard, and I can't shake the feeling that the glass lady isn't gone. She's just waiting. It's been almost a month since I took the mirror down, and I really thought that would be the end of it. For a while, things did feel normal again. Lily was sleeping through the night, eating better, and her preschool teacher said she'd been especially happy and talkative lately. I took that as a good sign, like whatever strange thing she'd been experiencing had passed. But then, about 2 weeks ago, I noticed something odd. Every morning, when I'd go into Lily's room to wake her up, the closet door would be slightly open. I always shut it at night. Always. When I asked if she'd been getting out of bed, she said I needed to say goodnight to her again. I didn't want to freak her out, so I just said, "Who, honey?" And she said, "The glass lady. She found another door." That stopped me cold. I asked what she meant, and Lily said, "She lives in the shiny part inside my closet now, the one that makes your face small." The closet door has a sliding mirror panel on one side. I'd never thought twice about it. That day, I moved her clothes to the spare room and told her we were doing a big girl upgrade. I played it off like a fun redecorating project. Ryan thought I was overreacting, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. That night, I slept with Lily in my bed, around 3 a.m. I woke up to her whispering again. Her eyes were open. But she wasn't really looking at me, she said. "She says she's almost ready to see you again," I asked. "Who's ready to see me?" Lily didn't answer. She just closed her eyes and fell back asleep. The next morning, she didn't remember saying anything. I didn't push it. I didn't want to plant more ideas in her head, but it was starting to get to me. I couldn't stop thinking about what she said. That same night, I went into the garage again. I don't even know why. The mirror was still under the blanket, exactly where I'd left it. But when I got close, the air felt cold. Like walking into a refrigerator, I lifted a corner of the blanket just enough to peek. The glass wasn't dusty anymore. It was perfectly clean, like someone had polished it. I swear I saw something move, just a shadow maybe, but it looked like someone standing behind my reflection. I dropped the blanket and ran back inside. Ryan heard me come in and asked what was wrong. I told him everything this time. The humming, Lily's whispers, the mirror being clean. He rubbed his face and said, "Okay, this has gone too far. We're getting rid of it tomorrow." So the next morning, he loaded it into the back of his truck and drove it to the dump. I watched him go, feeling this weird mix of relief and guilt, like I was betraying someone I didn't even know. That night, Lily woke up crying, not screaming, just this deep, mournful sobbing that broke my heart. I held her and asked what was wrong. She whispered, "She's gone. She said you made her leave. She says she just wanted to tell you what happened," I asked. "What happened?" Lily shook her head. "She says she fell into the water, and you didn't help her." That's when I realized she wasn't talking about me as in me. She meant my grandmother. The pieces started fitting together in the worst way. My mom never talked much about Grandma's childhood, but I remembered her saying something once about how they were playing by the pond and it was an accident. If Margaret really drowned when they were little, maybe Grandma carried guilt her whole life. Maybe that's what the glass lady was. Some echo of that grief, still clinging to reflections. The thing that haunts me now is what happened 2 nights later. I woke up around midnight because I heard water running. I thought maybe the bathroom faucet had a leak. When I got there, the door was wide open and the light was on. Lily was standing at the sink again. I said, "Lily, honey, what are you doing?" She turned to me with tears in her eyes and said, "She's in the water now. She says she's happy." I walked over and turned off the faucet. The mirror above the sink was fogged up from the steam, but as I wiped it with my hand, I froze. There were small handprints on the inside of the glass, like someone had pressed from the other side. Ryan says it must have been condensation or smudges from Lily, but they were too small, too defined. I haven't used that bathroom since. It's been a week now. Lily's been quiet, still drawing pictures, but every one of them has the same thing. A woman in a blue dress standing in front of water. "Yesterday," she said. "The glass lady says thank you." "She found her daughter again?" I asked. "Who's her daughter?" She smiled and said, "You?" I don't know how to process that. Ryan wants to replace every mirror in the house. I want to believe that's the end of it. But sometimes, late at night, I'll catch my reflection out of the corner of my eye. and for just a split second, it doesn't quite move when I do. It's been a few months since everything with the mirror happened, and I've been trying really hard to convince myself that life has gone back to normal. But the truth is, it hasn't, not completely. After Ryan threw the mirror away, I made a point to keep every reflective surface in the house covered for a while. Bathroom mirrors, picture frames, even the glass on the oven door. It made the house feel strange and dim, like we were living inside a secret we couldn't talk about. Lily didn't seem scared anymore, though. She'd stopped mentioning the glass lady. She was sleeping in her own room again. For a while, that was enough to let me breathe. But about a month ago, small things started happening again, subtle things. I'd hear faint tapping in the pipes, always at night, always near Lily's room. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of movement in the corner of my eye. Nothing dramatic, just the kind of flicker that makes you second-guess yourself. I told myself it was my mind playing tricks. After everything that happened, I wanted to believe I was just sensitive to any little sound. Then last week, Lily came home from school with a drawing her teacher said she'd made during free art time. It was of our old bathroom mirror, the one we got rid of, except this time, the woman in the picture was holding Lily's hand. When I asked about it, Lily said, "She visits me in my dreams now. She says she can't talk through glass anymore." I tried to keep my voice calm. "Does she tell you anything?" "She says we're all together again soon," she said, and smiled like it was the nicest thing in the world. That night, I sat on the edge of her bed long after she fell asleep. Her breathing was steady, peaceful, but I couldn't shake that feeling I'd had before. The sense that someone else was in the room. The air was heavy again, like before thunderstorms when everything feels charged. I stood up quietly and looked at the closet door. The mirrored panel was gone. We'd replaced it with wood. But in the faint light from the hallway, the surface still had a soft reflection. I leaned closer without meaning to, and that's when I saw it. Something behind me. It wasn't Lily, it wasn't Ryan, it was that same woman. Pale face, dark hair, blue dress. But her expression wasn't sad this time. She was smiling, I blinked, and she was gone. The next morning, Ryan found me sitting at the kitchen table before sunrise. He said I looked pale, and I didn't tell him why. What could I say? The ghost in our mirror came back to smile at me? He already thinks the whole thing was stress or postpartum anxiety that never really went away. But then, something happened that I can't explain away. Ryan had gone to work, and Lily was playing with her dolls in the living room. I was folding laundry when I heard her giggle and start whispering. I assumed she was pretending her dolls were talking. But after a few seconds, she said, "Mommy says hi." I looked over. "I'm right here." "Sweetheart," she shook her head. "Not you, my other mommy. The one in the water." That was the first time she'd ever said that. I walked over, trying to stay calm, and asked, "What do you mean, your other mommy?" She said, "She told me her little girl got lost, but now she found her again. She says she's not lonely anymore." I asked her if she saw the glass lady now. "She's not in the glass," Lily said softly. "She's in me." That's when I noticed her eyes. They looked darker, almost gray instead of their usual bright green. It only lasted a second before they went back to normal, but my stomach dropped. That night, Ryan said maybe we should talk to someone. A child psychologist, maybe even a family counselor. He doesn't believe in ghosts, but he said whatever's going on, it's clearly affecting both of us, I agreed. Though I could tell he thinks I'm the one who started this. By believing too much, we scheduled an appointment for next week. But the strangest part happened last night, around 2 a.m. I woke up to the sound of running water again. I shot up in bed, heart racing. The bathroom light was on. I didn't want to go in there, but I couldn't ignore it. When I opened the door, the sink was full, the faucet still running. Lily was standing there in her pajamas, wet up to her elbows, staring into the drain. I turned off the water and knelt beside her. "Lily, what are you doing?" I whispered. "She was washing her hands," she said quietly. "She said she had to clean them before she could hold mine." I wrapped her in a towel and brought her back to bed. She was asleep within minutes, but I stayed awake staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of any of this. When I finally went back to the bathroom around dawn, I saw something in the sink I hadn't noticed before. The water had left behind a faint residue, like dust or silt. But in the middle of it, drawn perfectly in a finger's trail, was a single word. "Sorry, I didn't show Ryan. I just wiped it away." I don't know what's real anymore. Whether I'm being haunted or I'm just seeing patterns and shadows. But I can tell you this. Sometimes, when I'm brushing my teeth at night, I catch Lily watching me from the hallway mirror, and every once in a while, just for a second, her reflection smiles before she does. And it's not her smile, stories number 4. My dinner turned into a standoff with an entitled woman who thought I shouldn't be allowed to face her table. Last night I had one of those experiences that makes you question how some people can walk around in public without an ounce of self-awareness or decency. I was out for dinner at this small Italian restaurant downtown. Not super fancy, but cozy, family-run, and known for its pasta. I'd had a long day at work and wanted a quiet meal by myself. Maybe a glass of wine and just some peace. The hostess, a young woman named Clara, seated me at a small 2-person table near the front window. It was perfect. A nice view of the street, soft music, and not too close to anyone else. I ordered lasagna and a glass of Merlot and pulled out a book while waiting. About 10 minutes later, this couple walks in. Late 40s, maybe early 50s. The man looked mild, kind of quiet. The type who probably goes along with whatever his wife says to avoid conflict. The woman, though, she was one of those. You could just feel it the moment she entered. Expensive jewelry, strong perfume that could knock a bird out of the sky, and an expression like she was auditioning for the role of queen of the restaurant. They were seated across from me, not directly, but maybe 10 feet away. We were both facing the same direction, meaning we could see each other if we looked up. No big deal, right? I went back to my book and minded my own business. About 5 minutes later, I noticed the woman whispering something to the waiter, a young guy named Jeremy, who looked like he was trying not to roll his eyes. He walked away, and I thought that was the end of it. Then he came to my table and gave me a kind of nervous smile. "Hey, sir," he said. "I'm really sorry to ask this, but would you mind if we moved you to a different table?" I looked around. The restaurant was almost full, and the only open tables were right by the kitchen or next to a loud family with kids. My table was ideal, so I asked, why?" He sighed and leaned in a bit. "That woman over there said she doesn't like people sitting across from her or facing her while she eats. It makes her uncomfortable." I actually laughed because I thought he was joking. "You're kidding, right?" He shook his head, looking embarrassed. "I wish I was. She's particular," I said. "Yeah, no, I'm not moving. I'm just eating and reading." He nodded like he understood and said, "Totally fair. I'll tell her." So he went back and politely told her I didn't want to move. She looked offended like I'd just slapped her. She said something sharp to him. I couldn't hear the words, but her tone was pure venom. Then she turned her attention to me. I could feel her eyes burning holes in the side of my head. Finally, she said, loud enough for half the restaurant to hear, "Some people just don't know how to be considerate." I didn't look up. I just kept reading, but she wasn't done. "Excuse me," she said, loudly enough that even the couple next to her turned. "Sir, I'm talking to you." I looked up slowly, calm as I could. "Yes?" She crossed her arms. "Would it kill you to move?" "I don't like being stared at while I eat." I blinked. "I'm not staring at you." "Well, you could," she said. "You're directly in my line of sight. It's rude." Now, everyone nearby was pretending not to listen, but absolutely was listening. I said, "Ma'am, I'm just trying to eat dinner." "I haven't looked at you once until now," she scoffed and said. "You're sitting directly across from me. It's uncomfortable. You should have the decency to accommodate someone else's boundaries." "Boundaries? For sitting in a chair facing a direction?" The waiter looked mortified. He whispered, "Ma'am, maybe we could move your table instead?" Her husband finally spoke for the first time. "Honey, let's just eat, okay?" But she glared at him like she could melt him with her eyes. "No. We shouldn't have to move because someone else doesn't understand basic manners." I looked straight at her then, just for a second, and said, "Ma'am, you're the only person making anyone uncomfortable right now." You could practically hear the record scratch. Her face turned red, and she started muttering something about disrespectful young people. I'm 32, but sure, the manager, a middle-aged man named Tony, came over at that point. He pulled the waiter aside, got the quick version of the story, and then came to me. "Sir, I'm very sorry about this. You're not doing anything wrong. Please, stay right where you are. I'll handle it." He turned to the woman and said, "Ma'am, we can't move other customers because of where they're sitting. If you're unhappy with your table, I can move you to another one," she gasped, like he'd insulted her lineage. "Are you suggesting that I'm the problem?" Tony didn't flinch. "I'm suggesting that everyone else seems to be enjoying their meal just fine." That did it. She grabbed her purse dramatically and stood up, nearly knocking over her wine glass. "We are leaving." This establishment clearly doesn't respect paying customers. Her husband sighed, mouthed sorry to the manager, and followed her out. The entire restaurant went quiet for a second. Then someone in the back started clapping softly. A few others joined in. I just sat there, kind of stunned, then started laughing. Tony came back and said, "Dinner's on the house tonight. Thanks for being patient." I told him that wasn't necessary, but he insisted. He said, "She's a regular, or was. We've had issues before. You handled it better than most." Apparently, that wasn't the first time she'd pulled something like that. According to Jeremy later, she'd once demanded that they move a family because children ruin the dining atmosphere. Another time, she complained that someone's laughter was too loud for a public space. I finished my dinner in peace after that. The lasagna was fantastic, the wine hit just right, and I even got a free tiramisu out of it. The staff thanked me again on the way out, and Tony said, "You'd be surprised how many people actually give in to her," I told him. Well, maybe that's why she keeps doing it. Walking back to my car, I couldn't help but think about how some people live in their own little universe where everything and everyone exists to revolve around them. It's wild. You can be sitting quietly, minding your own business, and somehow you're the villain in their story because you dared to exist in their line of sight. But honestly, I was proud of myself for staying calm. Younger me would have snapped or made a scene this time. I just let her make a fool of herself while I enjoyed free dinner and dessert. Guess the moral is, if someone demands the world bend around them, sometimes the best thing you can do is stay seated. Update. I honestly didn't expect to have anything worth updating, but apparently, the universe decided that one dinner incident wasn't enough. What started as a random, awkward restaurant moment turned into something much bigger. Because, believe it or not, that same entitled woman ended up crossing paths with me again. And this time it got even stranger. It's been about 2 weeks since that night. After the whole ordeal, I figured it was just a funny story I'd tell friends over drinks. "Hey, remember that lady who thought I shouldn't face her while she ate?" We laughed, moved on, life goes on. Then last Friday night, my girlfriend Emma and I went out to the same Italian place. It's one of her favorites now too, mostly because she wanted to see if the Queen had dared to return. The staff recognized me right away, Clara. The hostess greeted us with a grin and said, "You're back. Don't worry, we've got you a drama-free table tonight." Everything was normal. We ordered wine, talked about work, just a nice evening. Halfway through dinner, though, I noticed Tony, the manager, standing near the entrance looking tense, and then, you guessed it, in she walked. The same woman. I froze mid-sip. She was with the same guy, her poor husband, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. And she immediately started scanning the room like she was royalty inspecting peasants. Tony noticed me noticing her and gave me a look like, "I got this." He went up to her before she even sat down and said, "Ma'am, good evening. We actually have a new seating policy that requires reservations for certain sections. Translation: we're not seating you near anyone who might end up in your line of sight." She frowned. "That's ridiculous. I've never needed a reservation here before." He just smiled politely and said, "We've had to make a few changes. Would you like a table in the back patio area?" She hesitated, clearly insulted, but agreed. The back patio is nice, just less visible from the main dining room. They sat her there, and I thought that was that, but of course, peace never lasts with people like her. Maybe 20 minutes later, she must have spotted me through the glass divider because I heard her unmistakable voice from the patio. "Oh, for heaven's sake, it's him again," Emma whispered. "No way," I looked at her, and she mouthed, "Don't engage." I tried, I really did. But the woman was now standing at the divider, glaring at me through the glass like I'd just personally ruined her night again. Tony went over immediately. "Ma'am, please sit down." She pointed at me. "That man, he's following me. He's here again. He made me uncomfortable last time, and now he's back doing it again." Everyone turned. You could feel the entire restaurant collectively thinking, "Is she serious right now?" Tony said, calm as ever, "Ma'am, he's a regular customer. He's just having dinner with his girlfriend." She scoffed. "Oh, please, coincidence?" "I think not. Some people just can't let things go." At that point, Emma, bless her fiery soul, leaned toward me and whispered, "You know what? I'm done." She stood up, walked straight to the glass divider, and said, loud and clear, "Lady, we've been dating for 5 years, and I promise you, he's not following you. You're just not that interesting." The restaurant went dead silent. Then someone actually laughed out loud. An older man at the bar trying to cover it up with a cough. Tony looked like he wanted to high-five her. The woman's jaw dropped. She turned to her husband, expecting backup. But he just looked exhausted and said, "Maybe we should go." "No," she snapped. "I'm not leaving again. They should leave. They're harassing me." Tony stepped in immediately. "Ma'am, you're welcome to stay and finish your meal quietly. But if you continue to disrupt other guests, I'll have to ask you to leave." That was the final straw. She picked up her purse and stormed out, muttering about unprofessionalism and lawsuits. Her husband followed. Of course, after she left, Tony came over to our table and said, "I owe you 2 free desserts." We laughed it off, but he looked genuinely stressed. He said she'd been calling the restaurant during the week, complaining about the lack of privacy, and threatening to leave bad reviews online. And she wasn't kidding. By the time I got home, I checked the restaurant's Google page out of curiosity. And sure enough, there was a new 1-star review saying, "Rude staff, allow stalkers to dine freely. Unsafe environment." She didn't name me, obviously, but the timing made it clear who she meant. Here's the twist, though. Within a day, Tony and the staff started responding to reviews publicly. Under her review, he commented, "We're sorry you felt uncomfortable, but we do not tolerate false accusations about our customers or staff. The guest in question is a valued regular who did nothing wrong." Then, regulars flooded the page with positive reviews, mentioning how kind the staff was and how the restaurant handled rude patrons with grace. It was like a mini digital uprising in support of decent human behavior. Emma thought it was hilarious. She even made a meme out of it, a picture of a random spaghetti plate with the caption, "When your only crime was facing the wrong direction." A few days later, I went back to the restaurant to pick up takeout. Tony came out to hand me my order and said, "You'll be happy to know, she's banned officially. Lifetime." Apparently, after that night, she called the restaurant 3 more times, demanding an apology from the man who ruined her dining experience twice. Tony told her point blank that she was no longer welcome, and that if she kept calling, they'd consider it harassment. He told me she went completely silent after that. I don't know if I'll ever see her again, but the whole thing made me realize something weird. Some people genuinely believe the world is their stage, and everyone else is just an extra who needs to follow their script. And when you don't play your part, they lose their minds. It's funny now. In hindsight, at the time it was surreal, but honestly, I think Tony and the restaurant staff deserve a medal for patience. Now, whenever Emma and I go there, they jokingly ask, "You want the facing the queen table again?" And it's become this running joke among the regulars. So yeah, I guess the moral of the story is, sometimes the universe puts you face to face, literally, with the most ridiculous people just to test how calm you can stay. And if you're lucky, you get free dessert out of it. Final update. It's been almost 4 months since the restaurant showdown. And somehow, this bizarre little story still manages to find new ways to surprise me. I thought it was over after that woman got banned. I really did. But the universe apparently had one last laugh in store. So, after the second incident, Emma and I kept going back to that same Italian place about once every couple of weeks. It became our spot. The staff knew us by name, and the queen table joke became kind of a legend there. Tony even put up a small sign on the wall near where she'd sat that said, "Reserved for drama-free dining only." Customers loved it. We moved on with life, told the story a few times to friends, had a few good laughs about how entitled people can get. I thought that would be the end of it, until a few weeks ago, when I was at a different restaurant across town with some coworkers after a long Friday. The place was a steakhouse. Nice, casual vibe, booths everywhere. We got seated in a corner, and everything was fine until I heard a familiar voice. A voice that made my stomach drop and my coworkers say, "Man, someone's already starting trouble at the bar." I turned, and there she was, her, same woman, same haircut, same oversized sunglasses perched on her head, same designer bag, arguing with the bartender about something. I couldn't hear what at first, but she was waving her phone around like she was presenting evidence in a courtroom. At first I thought, no way she remembers me. It's been months. I turned back to my table, trying to stay invisible. But of course, fate doesn't work like that. About 15 minutes later, she started making her way across the restaurant toward the restroom, which, unfortunately, meant walking right past our booth. And the second she looked my way, her expression froze. Recognition hit instantly. She stopped dead, stared, and said loudly, "Oh, you again?" My coworkers looked at me totally confused. You know her? One of them whispered. I sighed. Kind of long story. She put a hand on her hip and said, Are you following me around? Or is this another one of your little coincidences? The entire section went quiet. I swear you could hear the clinking of glasses from across the restaurant. I kept my voice calm. Ma'am, I don't even live on this side of town. Please just keep walking. But she wouldn't. She smirked, clearly loving the attention, and said, Don't you tell me what to do. You harassed me at that other restaurant, and I won't have you ruining my dinner again. Now, my coworkers were looking at me like, What in the world did you do to this woman? I put my hands up slightly and said, Ma'am, I've literally spoken to you twice in my life. Both times because you decided you don't like where people sit. Just go enjoy your meal, she laughed. A loud, fake, dramatic laugh, and said, Sure. You think you can gaslight people? You're one of those creepy types who can't stand women setting boundaries. At that point, one of my coworkers, David, stood up and said, Lady, he hasn't looked at you once until now. You're making a scene. That did it. She spun toward him and snapped, Mind your own business. The manager, a young guy named Chris, hurried over. He must have sensed chaos brewing. Ma'am, is there a problem? She immediately started in with, That man, him, followed me here. He harassed me at another restaurant, and now he's here again. I want him removed, Chris blinked, clearly thrown off, and looked at me. Sir? I handed him my ID. You can check. I'm here with co-workers. I don't even live in this area. She's mistaken. He nodded slowly and turned back to her. Ma'am, unless you have proof of harassment, I can't remove a paying customer for sitting. She looked absolutely offended. You people don't take women seriously. You're just like the last place, defending stalkers. Chris stayed polite but firm. Ma'am, please calm down. If you continue to disturb other guests, I'll have to ask you to leave. That's when she lost it. She started yelling, something about lawsuits, injustice, and men ganging up on her. The bartender came over too, probably recognizing her from earlier, and muttered, This again? Under his breath eventually, security had to escort her out. She shouted the whole way to the door. You'll all regret this. I'll be calling corporate. The second the door closed, the entire place exhaled. People started murmuring, laughing quietly, shaking their heads. Chris apologized to us, and my coworkers, now fully entertained, started peppering me with questions. I told them the story, the whole story. The first restaurant, the line of sight nonsense, the second meltdown, the fake review. By the end, they were crying with laughter. David said, Dude, this lady's got a personal vendetta against your face. When we left, one of the waitresses actually came up to me outside and said, You're the guy from the Italian place, right? The manager there told us about you. Apparently, the restaurant community in our city is tighter than I thought. Tony had apparently told the story to a few colleagues at a local hospitality meetup, and it had turned into a kind of local urban legend, the woman who hates facing people. I laughed all the way home. A week later, Tony texted me, we'd exchanged numbers after everything. He sent me a link to a Facebook post from a neighborhood group, and there she was again, complaining about being victimized by rude diners. She didn't name names, but the details were unmistakable. The comments, though. Oh man, people weren't buying it anymore. Someone even replied, Ma'am, maybe you should just eat facing a wall next time. After that, she disappeared from local pages, and no one's seen her at any of the nearby restaurants since. Rumor is she's been banned from at least 3 places now. As for me, life's gone back to normal. Emma still jokes that I'm her public enemy #1 magnet. Every time we go out, she'll grin and say, Don't look directly at anyone. It's dangerous. But honestly, I've learned something weirdly profound from all this. Entitlement and insecurity are 2 sides of the same coin. People like her walk around acting powerful, but it's all armor. The moment the world doesn't bend for them, they crack. I don't hate her. Not really. I mostly feel pity. Imagine living a life where you believe everyone who looks your way is your enemy. Where you can't even enjoy dinner without seeing yourself as the center of conflict. I hope, wherever she is, she finds peace. Or at least a restaurant with enough walls to make her happy. For me, I'll keep going to that little Italian place, eating my lasagna, facing whatever direction I please, and enjoying the hell out of it because honestly, the food's still worth the drama. Stories number 5. My male boss told me period pain isn't a real reason to work from home, and I can't stop thinking about it. I'm still fuming as I write this because I can't believe this actually happened in 2025. You'd think by now, people, especially those in management, would have a basic understanding of women's health. But apparently that's too much to ask. I'm 27, and I work as a marketing analyst for a mid-sized tech company in Seattle. I've been with the company for a little over 2 years, and until recently I actually liked my job. The team's solid, I've got great coworkers, and the flexibility was a huge selling point when I took the position. My boss, Mark 38, has always been one of those work hard, play hard types, not awful but very corporate bro energy. He's charismatic, competitive, loves crushing Q4 goals, and uses the word synergy without irony. Normally I can roll my eyes and deal with it. But this week, he crossed a line that's been eating at me. So, I have really painful periods. I've seen doctors about it. They think it might be endometriosis. But I'm still in that awful diagnostic limbo where you get tests, wait months for follow-ups, and just manage pain the best you can. Some months are fine. Other months, it's brutal, like someone's twisting a knife inside me. Usually when it's bad, I'll work from home for a day or two. My job can be done entirely remotely. Literally everything I do is on my laptop. I always communicate, hit my deadlines, and stay available on Slack. My previous manager was completely fine with it. Mark took over our department about 7 months ago when my old boss left for another company. He's made a few offhand comments about WFH before, like, I prefer seeing people in person, feels more productive, but never enforced a strict rule. Until this week, on Monday morning, I woke up with that familiar gut-twisting pain. I took medication, used a heating pad, and emailed Mark around 7:30 a.m. Hey, I'm having really bad cramps today. I'll be working from home but will be available on Slack and for meetings. I didn't think it was a big deal. I had one internal meeting scheduled and some reports to finish. Totally doable from home. About 15 minutes later, I got a reply from him. Hey, please remember our team is expected to be in office unless there's an approved medical reason or emergency. If you're not feeling well enough to come in, you can take a sick day. WFH is not an option for non-medical issues. I stared at the email for a full minute. Trying to process it? Non-medical issue? Did he seriously just say that? I replied, trying to stay professional. Hi, Mark. Just to clarify, menstrual pain is a legitimate medical condition. I'm not too sick to work. I just need to be home to manage symptoms. I'll still be fully available and productive today. He didn't respond for hours. When he finally did, it was this gem, I understand. But period discomfort isn't considered a medical reason for WFH under company policy. If it's impacting your ability to work, please take a sick day and rest, I swear. I felt my blood pressure rise, period discomfort, as if I was talking about a mild headache or something. I wanted to march into his office and ask if he'd ever tried functioning while bleeding, nauseous, and doubled over in pain. Instead, I messaged HR. I didn't want to start a war. But I needed to know if this policy was real, or if Mark was just pulling it out of nowhere. HR's response was vague. They said, WFH requests are at the discretion of department leadership, but accommodations for health-related reasons can be discussed on a case-by-case basis. So basically, he can do what he wants, but if you make it a big enough deal, we might care. I was furious. I ended up taking the sick day, not because I couldn't work, but because I couldn't stomach the idea of giving 100% while my boss acted like I was faking it. The next day, I went into the office still cramping and exhausted, but determined to have a conversation. I caught Mark after our morning meeting and asked if we could talk privately. He said sure, looking like he had no idea what was coming. I told him calmly, I just want to clarify something about yesterday. When I said I was having period pain, that's a medical condition. It's not just discomfort. It's something I've seen doctors for. Working from home helps me manage it while still staying productive. He gave me this tight smile and said, I understand it's uncomfortable, but if we start allowing WFH for that, we'd have to make exceptions for everything. Headaches, stomach aches, minor colds. It sets a precedent. I swear I almost lost it right there. I said, Mark, it's not a stomach ache. It's a chronic condition that can be debilitating for some people. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for empathy and flexibility. I've never missed a deadline or slacked off. He leaned back and said, look, I'm not minimizing it. I just think we should be professional about attendance. If someone's not well enough to come in, they take a sick day, simple as that. Professional? The word felt like a slap. I left that conversation shaking with anger. Later that day, I texted my coworker and friend, Laura, 26, about it. She was horrified. She told me she'd taken WFH days before when she had migraines, and no one said a word. That's when I realized this wasn't about policy at all. It was about him not taking women's pain seriously. I decided to document everything. The emails, our conversation notes, HR responses, all of it. I wasn't sure what I'd do with it yet, but I knew I needed a record. Over the next few days, I noticed something interesting. Mark suddenly started being overly formal with me, CCing HR on random project updates, nitpicking small things he'd never cared about before, making little comments like, "Glad you're feeling better and made it in today." It felt retaliatory, like he was annoyed I'd challenged him. By Friday, I was mentally done. I went home that night and cried out of pure frustration. Not just because of Mark, but because of the bigger picture. How so many women have to justify basic bodily functions just to be treated fairly at work. Over the weekend, I decided I wasn't going to let this slide quietly. Monday morning, I sent a detailed email to HR outlining the situation. I explained how Mark's comments minimized a medical condition, applied policy inconsistently, and made me feel singled out. I attached the screenshots and emails. 2 days later, HR scheduled a follow-up meeting. When I walked in, Mark was already there, looking uncomfortable. HR's rep, a woman named Danielle, started by saying they'd reviewed my complaint and were looking into how team leaders interpret flexible work policies. Mark tried to jump in with his usual corporate tone. I didn't intend to make anyone feel dismissed. I was simply enforcing expectations fairly. Danielle cut him off, politely but firmly, and said, "Menstrual pain is a recognized medical condition. Employees managing chronic symptoms are entitled to reasonable flexibility under our health and wellness policy. That includes remote work." I could have hugged her. Mark's face turned red, and for the first time, he didn't have a slick answer ready. After the meeting, Danielle pulled me aside and told me I'd done the right thing by speaking up. She said they were going to issue clearer internal guidelines and make sure all managers received sensitivity training regarding health accommodations. Since then, Mark's attitude toward me has been noticeably different. He's overly polite now, almost awkwardly so. He even started approving WFH requests without hesitation. It's like he's terrified of saying the wrong thing again. I'm not naive enough to think he's had a complete change of heart. But at least now there's accountability. And honestly, it's not just about me anymore. Since that whole thing happened, a couple of women on my team quietly thanked me for setting a precedent. One said she'd been too scared to ask for flexibility during her own period pain because she didn't want to seem unprofessional. That broke my heart a little. It made me realize how deep the problem runs. That women are conditioned to apologize for something natural and painful just to keep peace at work. I've been thinking a lot about that word Mark used. Professional. How often it's used to silence people or force them to hide their humanity. But the truth is, there's nothing unprofessional about taking care of your health. There's nothing unprofessional about being a woman with a body that bleeds once a month. And if that makes someone uncomfortable, maybe they're the ones who need to adjust, not us. Update. It's been about 5 months since the whole period pain isn't a real medical reason fiasco happened. And honestly, it's been one of the most eye-opening chapters of my professional life. I didn't plan to post an update, but so much has unfolded since then that I think it's worth sharing, especially for anyone who's been dismissed or gaslit at work for something they can't control. After HR's meeting where they called out Mark and said menstrual pain was a valid medical condition, things got complicated, not explosive, but definitely weird. Mark started treating me differently. Not hostile, but stiff. He'd always been a talkative, confident guy, but now he was overly cautious around me, like he'd CC HR on random emails that didn't need oversight, or he'd schedule meetings with both me and another coworker present, almost like he didn't want to be alone in a room with me. At first, it made me feel guilty, even though I knew I'd done nothing wrong. I caught myself over-explaining things to him, trying to smooth things over. But then I realized, why am I the one tiptoeing around? He was the one who dismissed me and made a sexist assumption. The guilt didn't belong to me. The real shift happened during our next quarterly performance reviews. I was nervous going in because I didn't know if he'd let his bruised ego affect my review, but surprisingly, it was completely neutral. Not glowing like before, but solid. He said my work was consistent and reliable. No feedback about attitude or communication, which is the usual passive-aggressive stuff some managers use to mask resentment. I walked out feeling relieved but still uneasy. It felt like we were both pretending the incident had never happened. Like a bad sitcom plot that got quietly dropped mid-season. But then, a few weeks later, HR reached out again. Not about me specifically. but about a company-wide wellness and inclusivity training. They'd decided to make it mandatory for all management-level employees after reviewing how flexible work policies were being applied inconsistently. I didn't think much of it until Laura, my coworker friend, told me she saw Mark attending one of the sessions over Zoom and looking absolutely miserable the entire time. A week later, Danielle from HR pulled me aside after a team meeting. She said, "I wanted to thank you again for bringing that issue up. You weren't the only one affected, but you were the first to say something." Apparently, 2 other women from different departments had quietly reported similar experiences with their own managers. One about being denied WFH during IVF treatment, another about being told to plan her schedule better around migraines. My case had sparked a wider review, and HR realized this was part of a pattern. I can't describe how validating that felt. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about all the women being silently dismissed. After that, something subtle but noticeable changed in the office culture. More people started using our wellness days. More WFH requests were approved without resistance. And our Slack channels even added a new health and well-being category where employees could share resources about chronic pain, mental health, or reproductive health. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. As for Mark, let's just say karma didn't take long. About 2 months after everything blew up, he was quietly moved to a strategic operations role. Still a manager, but not over people directly anymore. It was pitched as a restructuring, but everyone knew it was a soft demotion. Now he handles logistics and data oversight instead of leading a full team. HR never said anything officially, but it doesn't take a genius to connect the dots. When the change happened, he called me into a quick meeting to transition some responsibilities. He looked uncomfortable the entire time, like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. I decided to make it easy for him. I said, "I know this has been awkward, but I do want to say that I appreciate you keeping things professional after everything." He nodded and said, "Yeah, I learned a few things the hard way. That was the closest thing I ever got to an apology, and honestly, it was enough." After he stepped back, we got a new department head, a woman named Allison, 42, who's one of those rare leaders that manages with actual empathy. She's sharp, organized, and has this calm, no-nonsense energy. On her first week, she sat down with each of us individually to talk about flexibility, workloads, and personal needs. When I mentioned my health stuff, she didn't flinch or brush it off. She just said, "Got it. Do what you need to take care of yourself. I trust you." I could have cried. That's literally all I'd wanted from the start. Basic trust and understanding. Under Allison, things have improved dramatically. Productivity's actually gone up because people aren't afraid to ask for what they need. It's proof that empathy isn't weakness. It's management done right. As for me personally, this experience changed a lot about how I view my worth at work. Before, I used to just accept unfair things because I didn't want to seem difficult or emotional. I worried that standing up for myself would make me a problem employee. Now I see how dangerous that mindset is. It allows people like Mark to keep operating unchecked. There's this moment that really stuck with me. A few weeks ago, one of our newer hires, a woman fresh out of college, messaged me privately on Slack. She said, "Hey, I heard about what happened with your old boss. I just wanted to say thank you. It made me feel safer knowing someone actually spoke up." I almost cried right there at my desk, because that's the thing. Speaking up doesn't always feel like a victory when you're in it. It feels scary and isolating, but later, when you see that it helped someone else, it clicks. It was worth it. I still have painful periods. I still work from home when they hit hard. But now I don't have to explain myself. I don't have to justify my pain to someone who's never felt it. That simple freedom feels huge. Sometimes I catch myself thinking back to that first email Mark sent. Period discomfort isn't a medical reason. It used to make me angry, but now it just makes me shake my head, because what he really meant was, I don't understand this, so I don't take it seriously. And that right there is the problem, not just with him, but with so many workplaces that still treat women's pain as an inconvenience instead of a reality. But here's the thing. Awareness is contagious. Once people see what advocacy looks like, they start doing it too. Now, our company's HR department is drafting clearer health policies that explicitly include reproductive health, chronic pain, and menstrual-related conditions. They even asked for volunteer employees to review the language before final approval. And Danielle personally asked me to participate. I said yes, not because I want recognition, but because I want the next woman who's doubled over in pain at 7:30 a.m. to feel safe saying, "I'm working from home today." No questions, no judgment, no guilt. If you told me months ago that standing up to one clueless, dismissive boss would end up changing company policy, I wouldn't have believed you. But here we are, and the best part? The women in my office talk about this stuff openly now. We share heating pad recommendations, joke about menstrual solidarity, and don't hide it like it's shameful. The taboo's finally cracking, one conversation at a time. I've learned that silence protects no one except the person in power, and once you break it, the whole structure starts to shift. So yeah, my boss told me period pain wasn't a real reason to work from home. Now, it's written into company policy that it is, and I don't think I've ever been prouder of myself. Final update? It's been almost a year since the period pain isn't a real reason comment happened. And looking back now, it almost feels like something that happened to a different person. I've gone through so many emotional stages: shock, anger, guilt, frustration, quiet pride, and eventually, peace. I wanted to write this last update because I think the story deserves closure, and because I've learned so much about myself, my boundaries, and what real respect in the workplace looks like. After my last update, the company finalized its new health and flexibility policy. It's now written in black and white. Employees experiencing menstrual pain or other chronic health symptoms are entitled to flexible scheduling or remote work accommodations, subject only to notification, not approval. That last part, not approval, is everything. It means no one has to justify their pain or beg for permission to work from home. HR told me they added that line after hearing multiple employees share how they felt uncomfortable asking for basic leniency when unwell. It might sound like a small policy change to some, but to anyone who's been through what I did, it's huge. I was also asked to help lead a panel discussion for Women's Health Month this past spring. I almost turned it down because public speaking terrifies me. But Danielle HR convinced me. She said, "You don't need to be polished. You just need to be real." So, I shared what happened. Not naming names, of course. And how it made me realize how often women downplay their own pain to seem professional. I talked about how normalizing conversations about health can actually strengthen teams instead of weakening them. When I finished, the room was quiet for a few seconds. And then people started clapping. Not polite, obligatory clapping. Genuine, heartfelt clapping. A few coworkers came up to me after to say it was the first time they'd ever heard someone talk openly about periods in a corporate setting. One woman actually teared up and said, "I've been working here 15 years, and I've never heard anyone mention menstrual pain out loud." Thank you. It hit me then how powerful honesty can be, even about something as natural and common as menstruation. Something we're taught to hide. After the event, our new department head, Allison, called me into her office and said, "You should be proud of yourself. What you did took courage." She wasn't exaggerating or trying to be nice. She said it like a fact, and I realized for the first time. I actually was proud. The ripple effects kept going. Our company partnered with a wellness organization that provides health education sessions and resources for employees dealing with reproductive health issues. Menopause, fertility challenges, and chronic pain. They even stocked the women's restroom with free sanitary products. Which seems so basic, but it made a lot of people emotional. It's the kind of quiet, tangible care that says, "We see you." As for Mark, he eventually left the company about 3 months ago. It wasn't dramatic, just one of those pursuing new opportunities LinkedIn posts. From what I heard, he took a role at a logistics firm. I don't wish him any ill will, honestly. I hope he learned something from this experience. He wasn't evil. He was ignorant and dismissive, which can sometimes be just as harmful. But it's also something people can change if they're willing. I did run into him once before he left in the lobby. He gave me this small nod, kind of awkward but not unfriendly, and said, "You really made a difference here." You know, I didn't expect that. I just smiled and said, "I think we all learned something." And that was that. After he left, the atmosphere in our department completely lightened. People felt freer, more open, more relaxed. You could tell folks weren't walking on eggshells anymore. But here's the part that surprised me the most. This whole situation ended up shifting how I view myself. I used to think being professional meant being quiet, composed, and never making waves. I was always the person who wanted to be liked, to be seen as easygoing, the kind of employee who says no problem, even when it is a problem. But this experience taught me that true professionalism isn't about silence. It's about integrity. It's about knowing when something is wrong and choosing to speak up, even if it makes people uncomfortable. Since then, I've started mentoring a few of the younger women in our office. Not officially, just informally. When they ask for advice or need help navigating tricky situations. One of them, Emma, told me she used my story as motivation to ask for better accommodations for her endometriosis flare-ups. Another, Rachel, said she finally stopped apologizing every time she needed a mental health day. It's like this small revolution happening in slow motion. One act of courage inspiring another. And for me, that's the best possible ending. I've also noticed a shift in how the men in our office talk about health topics now. They're more respectful, more aware. During a recent meeting, one of the male team leads said something like, "If anyone needs to step out or adjust hours because they're unwell, just let us know. We all have those days." No awkwardness, no joking tone, just normal, empathetic professionalism. I know it might sound idealistic, but seeing that kind of change, especially in a corporate setting, feels massive, because it proves that change doesn't always have to come from the top. Sometimes it starts with one uncomfortable conversation that makes everyone stop and think. Personally, I've started feeling more balanced too. I no longer dread that time of the month at work. I plan my schedule around it without guilt. I rest when I need to, and I'm still excelling at my job. My productivity hasn't dropped. If anything, it's improved. Because I'm not pushing through pain or hiding discomfort outside of work. This experience made me more vocal in other areas of my life too. I've spoken to friends about advocating for themselves with doctors, family, or partners when it comes to their health. I think, for so long, we've been conditioned to minimize women's pain, to label it as overreacting. But the moment we stop accepting that narrative, everything starts to change. The other day, I got an email from Danielle, the HR rep who handled my case. She said the company had been nominated for a local Workplace Wellness Innovation Award for their new inclusivity policies, and she wanted to personally thank me for sparking that movement. She ended the email with, "Sometimes progress starts with one uncomfortable conversation." "You started ours," I cried a little, reading that, not because I needed validation, but because it reminded me of how scared I was that first day when my boss dismissed my pain like it didn't matter. I remember sitting at my desk, hands shaking, wondering if I was being dramatic, if I'd overreacted, if speaking up would ruin my reputation, and now here I was, seeing actual systemic change come from that moment. If anyone reading this is dealing with a boss, coworker, or workplace that dismisses their pain, please don't let them make you feel small. You are not weak for needing care. You are not difficult for setting boundaries. Your body is not an inconvenience. Standing up for yourself doesn't always feel triumphant in the moment. Sometimes it feels terrifying. But the real victory comes later, when you realize you've made it easier for the next person who walks that same path. So yeah, my boss once told me period pain wasn't a real reason to work from home. Now, the policy says otherwise, the culture says otherwise, and I say otherwise. That's my closure. That's my peace, and honestly, it feels damn good to finally have both. Stories number 6. My former crush turned out to be an asshole, and today I humbled him in front of everyone. Back in high school, I had the biggest crush on this guy named Austin. He was the kind of person everyone knew. Varsity baseball, easy smile, always surrounded by people. He wasn't cruel, but he definitely knew he was popular. I was one of those girls who blended into the background, not a total loner. Just the kind of person you'd forget was in your math class, even though I sat 2 seats away the whole semester. Austin and I didn't talk much, but when we did, he was always nice enough to make me overanalyze it for days. Once he borrowed a pencil from me, smiled, and said, "Thanks. You're a lifesaver." I swear I wrote that quote in my notebook, like it was something out of a romance novel. I thought he was genuinely sweet, until senior year. We got paired for a group project in our history class. It was me, Austin, and 2 other people from the start. It was obvious he wasn't going to do much. Every time we tried to meet, he had practice or some family thing. I ended up doing most of it while he half-heartedly typed a few lines the night before. When we presented, he somehow spun it like he'd led the entire project. Our teacher even complimented him for being such a good organizer. After class, I remember overhearing him laughing with his friends, saying something like, "Man, I didn't even read half that paper. Guess the nerds are good for something." That was the moment my crush died. After graduation, everyone scattered. I went to college out of state, studied communications, and eventually got a job at a mid-sized marketing firm. I built a good life, nothing flashy, but solid. The kind of life you can be proud of when you start from a small town where everyone thinks success means getting out. Fast forward to today, our company was hosting a regional networking event downtown. A mix of small business owners, marketing reps, and local startups. I was part of the team organizing it, so I got there early to help set up. About an hour in, I heard a familiar voice behind me say, "Wow, look who's running the show." It was Austin. He looked mostly the same, slightly broader, same confident smirk. Maybe a little too sure of himself for a Tuesday morning. He told me he'd started his own small business a couple years ago. Some kind of sports apparel thing, apparently. He'd been invited to the event to give a short talk about building brand identity. I had to laugh internally at that one. The guy who once claimed he didn't need to read to pass was now an entrepreneur talking about branding. Still, I stayed polite. I told him it was nice to see him again and asked about his business. He launched straight into what sounded like a sales pitch. How his vision was redefining athletic wear. How he was partnering with major names. How he'd done all the marketing himself. I asked a few professional questions. The kind you'd ask anyone. But I could tell he was mostly enjoying hearing himself talk. When the event started, I got busy making sure the speakers were prepped. Austin was the second to last one on the schedule. Before his talk, he came up to me and said, "Hey, don't be nervous. You're doing great for, being behind the scenes." The way he said it, condescending. Like I was just some assistant fetching water, made my teeth clench. He went up to give his presentation, and it was bad, like painfully bad. He had nice slides. But everything he said was vague. Build trust with your audience. Be authentic. The key to success is passion. Not a single concrete example. No data, no storytelling, just empty buzzwords and a lot of awkward chuckling. When the Q&A started, the moderator asked if anyone had questions. Nobody did at first. Then I raised my hand. "Could you give a specific example of a branding strategy you developed that directly increased engagement or sales?" He looked surprised, probably didn't expect me to say anything. He fumbled for a second, then said, "Well, I don't have the numbers on me, but our engagement definitely went up after we focused on community." I smiled politely. "What does focusing on community look like for your company? Could you walk us through the campaign structure?" He blinked, clearly thrown off. Well, I mean, it's all about, connecting, being real." "So no actual campaign plan?" I asked, keeping my tone professional. The room went quiet. He tried to laugh it off, saying something like, "Guess I'll have to hire your firm to teach me how it's done." People chuckled politely. But the damage was done. The moderator quickly moved on. But I caught a few attendees whispering to each other. After the event, one of our senior partners actually came over to me and said, "You handled that beautifully. You asked exactly what I was thinking." Austin came up to me a little later, clearly uncomfortable but trying to play it cool. "You really hit me with the tough questions there," he said. I smiled. "You're the one talking about brand strategy. I figured you'd be ready." He laughed awkwardly and said, "Yeah, well, guess I'll be more prepared next time." Then he left early. I don't usually take pleasure in seeing someone embarrassed, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel satisfying. Not because I wanted revenge for high school. Honestly, that part of my life feels like a lifetime ago. But because it felt like balance. The same guy who once took credit for my work got humbled by being asked to actually show his own. When I got home, I made a cup of tea, sat on my couch, and scrolled through the event photos someone posted on our company page. There I was, in the background of one shot, standing behind the podium while Austin talked, and even though it wasn't intentional, I couldn't help but notice the expression on his face. A mix of forced confidence and realization that he wasn't the smartest person in the room anymore. It wasn't a dramatic takedown. Nobody booed him or laughed out loud, but sometimes, humbling someone doesn't take a scene. It just takes a moment where they have to face that the world doesn't see them the way they see themselves anymore. And that moment happened for him today. It's been about 2 weeks since that networking event, and I honestly didn't expect to think about it again. I figured it'd just be one of those satisfying little life moments that you mentally bookmark and move on from. But apparently, life had other plans, because Austin wasn't done with me. The Monday after the event, I got an email from him, subject line, about the other day. It started off polite enough. He thanked me for keeping him on his toes during the Q&A and said he respected my passion for detail. Then the email took a turn. He wrote that he always admired smart girls, and that maybe we should catch up over dinner sometime. I actually laughed out loud reading it. The guy who used to make jokes about nerds doing all the work was now trying to flirt with me using the same intelligence he once underestimated. I didn't reply. 3 days later, he messaged me on LinkedIn, something like, "Not sure if my email went to spam. Would love to talk collaboration or just reconnect." That time, I gave a polite but professional answer, thanked him for reaching out, said I was glad he enjoyed the event, and that any business inquiries should go through our firm's official contact page. I thought that would end it, but then, last Friday, my boss asked me to join a meeting with a potential new client. When I walked into the conference room, guess who was sitting at the table? Austin. He looked surprised too, like he hadn't realized who he'd be meeting with. My boss introduced us like we were strangers, and we both pretended we were. I could practically feel the tension in the air. He gave his pitch, this time much more polished. Clearly rehearsed, he'd done his homework. I'll give him that. He talked about wanting our firm to help his brand with content strategy and PR. My boss listened politely, but every time Austin started to oversell something, my boss would turn to me for my opinion. I didn't sugarcoat anything when Austin said, "We've been getting great traction with our influencer partnerships," my boss asked. "Can you elaborate on engagement rates?" I looked at the report he brought and said, "These aren't actual engagement rates, they're impressions." "It's not the same metric," Austin smiled stiffly. Right, but impressions show visibility, which is still valuable." "Sure," I said, "but engagement shows interest. Visibility without engagement is just noise." He didn't say anything after that. When the meeting ended, my boss thanked him for coming in and said we'd be in touch. As soon as he left, my boss turned to me and said, "He's confident, but I don't think his company's ready for what we do." Good instincts in there. That felt good. I don't usually need validation, but hearing it in that moment hit differently. It wasn't about getting one over on him. It was about finally seeing the gap between who he thinks he is and how the world actually sees him. Later that night, Austin texted me from a number I didn't recognize. He must have gotten it from the company contact list, the message said. "You really know how to make a guy feel small, huh? You didn't have to do that in front of your boss." I stared at it for a full minute before replying. I just said I was doing my job. He didn't respond for a while, then finally sent, "Guess I deserved that. That should have been the end of it." But over the weekend, he posted something on his business Instagram that made it clear he was trying to save face. It was a picture of him giving a presentation with the caption, "Surround yourself with people who challenge you, even if they think they're smarter. It only makes you better." Subtle, right? I ignored it. But my coworker texted me a screenshot with the message, "Is this about you?" I just sent back a shrug emoji. This Monday, though, things came full circle. We hosted a follow-up event for smaller businesses, kind of a mini workshop for local entrepreneurs. I was leading a breakout session on digital storytelling. Midway through, I noticed Austin had signed up again. He sat quietly this time, took notes, didn't say a word until the end. After the session, he came up to me and said, "I actually learned a lot. I think I needed that." He sounded sincere. Not fake sincere, not embarrassed, just humbled. I told him, "That's good to hear." "I'm glad you came." He nodded and said, "I used to think confidence was enough. Turns out, it's not." Then he smiled. Not that smug grin from high school, but a real one. "You were right to call me out. Back then and now, for the first time, I didn't feel annoyed. I felt like I was finally seeing the person behind all the posturing. When I got home that night, I realized something. I wasn't mad at him anymore. Not because he'd apologized or because I needed closure, but because I'd already outgrown him years ago. The version of me who used to blush when he said my name would have never believed we'd end up like this. Me teaching, him listening, it's strange. The way time humbles people, some by force, some by choice. I don't know if he'll ever really change, but I think for the first time he might actually try, and that's enough for me. Sometimes, life doesn't give you the dramatic revenge you dream about in high school. Sometimes it gives you something better, a quiet, satisfying reminder that you became the person you once thought you weren't good enough for. It's been a few months since everything happened with Austin, and honestly, I didn't plan on thinking about him again after that last workshop. But life has a funny way of looping back around just when you think you've closed the book for good. The follow-up event I led got a lot of attention in our local business community. Our firm started offering regular consulting sessions for small startups, and I became one of the point people for those. I loved it. Seeing people build something from nothing, watching ideas turn into plans. Then, about a month ago, my assistant told me we had a new client request for one-on-one brand development coaching. The name on the form? Austin Miller, I won't lie. I groaned when I saw it. Part of me wanted to decline. Another part thought it might be a decent chance to end things on a clean note. The truth is, I didn't hate him. I just didn't want him in my orbit anymore. Still, I accepted the meeting. He showed up looking different. Not just physically, though he had cut his hair shorter and traded the flashy watch for something simple, but in how he carried himself. No exaggerated confidence, no I'm the man energy. He looked grounded. He started with, "I know I'm probably the last person you wanted to see on your schedule." I laughed a little. "You're not wrong," he smiled, but it was humble this time. "I deserve that." He explained that his business had taken a hit over the last few months. A few bad supply chain decisions, a failed partnership, some bad PR after an influencer deal went sideways. He admitted that he'd built everything on image and momentum, but not much on actual structure. "I thought branding was about looking confident," he said. "Turns out, people can tell when there's nothing underneath it." I listened, trying to stay professional, but it was strange seeing him like that. For the first time, he wasn't performing. He was just being honest. We talked for almost 2 hours about how to rebuild his messaging, how to actually tell his story instead of selling an illusion. He took notes, asked questions, even laughed at himself a few times. When the meeting ended, he said, "I know I was kind of a jerk to you, in high school and after. I've been thinking about that a lot. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. It was simple. No dramatic speech, no excuses, just a quiet, genuine apology." And I believed him. I told him, "You were a teenager. Most of us were idiots back then. You grew up. That's what matters." He nodded. Still, I was cruel without realizing it. I used to think I was the main character, and everyone else was just filler. You were one of the people who proved me wrong. I don't know why, but that one stuck with me. Since that meeting, I've seen him a few more times. Strictly professional, but surprisingly easy. His business is actually improving. He's been applying what we talked about. Real campaigns, honest branding, using his story instead of faking one. A few of his posts even give credit to the mentors and advisors who challenged his ego. I never expected to be one of those people for him. A few nights ago, I ran into him again at another event. Same venue where this all started. This time, he wasn't the speaker. He was helping sponsor a youth baseball fundraiser. When I walked in, he smiled and waved me over. He introduced me to his team as one of the smartest people he's ever worked with. And I'll be honest, he said it with genuine pride, not flattery. We talked for a while, mostly about work, a little about life. He mentioned that he was engaged now. Her name's Hannah. She's a physical therapist, and apparently, she's the one who convinced him to get therapy after his business crashed. I told him she sounded great. He said, "She is. She's the one who keeps me honest." Hearing that didn't sting like I thought it might. It actually made me happy for him. People grow up. If they let themselves. He finally did. After the event, when I got home, I sat in my car for a few minutes before going inside. I kept thinking about how different everything feels now. How weirdly full circle it all became. When I was 17, I thought people like Austin were the standard, the ones who set the pace for what mattered. Now I know better. The people worth admiring are the ones who admit they were wrong and decide to change anyway. And me? I learned that sometimes, humbling someone doesn't mean destroying them or proving a point. Sometimes it means being part of the lesson that helps them rebuild. I don't know if I'll see Austin again after this quarter's work wraps up, but even if I don't, I'll remember that moment when he said, "You were right to challenge me, not out of pride, but because it reminded me that the best kind of full circle isn't revenge, it's growth." He found his, and I realized I'd already found mine a long time ago. Stories number 7. My friend got mad at me because I didn't praise her for buying a skirt. I'm honestly still trying to wrap my head around how this turned into such a big deal. It started as one of those casual hangouts that goes completely sideways. And now I'm questioning if I missed some hidden social rule. So I 29F have this friend, Haley 30F. We've been close since college. Same major, same sarcastic sense of humor. Lots of late-night coffee runs and crying over bad boyfriends. She's always been a bit dramatic, but usually in a fun, charming way, like she's the kind of person who claps her hands when she gets excited or texts in all caps when she finds a new restaurant she loves. She's also very into empowerment talk, body positivity, confidence, self-expression, that kind of thing. A few weeks ago, she told our group chat she'd been struggling with confidence in her body. She'd gained a bit of weight, and she was trying to feel good about herself again. Totally understandable. We were all supportive, sent her little pep messages, complimented her photos, that sort of thing. Anyway, One Saturday afternoon, she texted me saying she wanted to go shopping and asked if I'd tag along. I said sure. It had been a stressful week at work, and a mall trip sounded like a nice mental break. We hit up a few stores, grabbed some iced lattes, and ended up at a boutique that had all those trendy Pinterest-looking outfits. Flowy skirts, cropped sweaters, floral dresses. Haley immediately gravitated toward this short pink skirt. It was cute, but also not something she'd ever worn before. She used to live in jeans and graphic tees. She held it up against her and said, "Do you think I could pull this off?" I smiled and said, "Yeah, I think so, it's cute." She frowned. "Just cute?" "Yeah," I said, kind of laughing. "It's a skirt, Haley." "Cute skirt, I thought that was that." But she got really quiet. She went to try it on, and when she came out, she looked great. It actually suited her really well. She did a little twirl and said, "Be honest, what do you think?" I told her, "It looks nice. You look good in pink." Apparently that wasn't enough. She made this disappointed face and said, "You're not really excited for me, are you?" I blinked. "Excited? I mean, I think you look good. What else do you want me to say?" She sighed and went back into the changing room. When she came out, she had the skirt draped over her arm and said, "Never mind. I think I'll just get it." I figured she just wanted space, so I didn't push it. We paid, grabbed some pretzels, and she was mostly quiet the rest of the afternoon. That night, I got this long text from her. It started off with, "Hey, I need to be honest about something because it's been bothering me all day." She wrote that she felt really hurt by how cold I was during our shopping trip. She said she'd been super nervous about trying on something so feminine and vulnerable, and she wanted her best friend to cheer her on, to celebrate her for stepping out of her comfort zone. She said that when I just said, "It's cute," it made her feel dismissed and unsupported. I reread that text a few times because I was confused. I didn't think she wanted a celebration. I thought we were two adults shopping for clothes. I replied something like, "I wasn't trying to be cold. I told you it looked good. I didn't realize I needed to throw you a parade over a skirt." That apparently was the wrong thing to say. She didn't reply that night. The next morning, I woke up to messages in our group chat where she'd basically made a passive-aggressive post about friends who can't be happy for you when you're healing. She didn't name me, but the timing was obvious. Our mutual friends were confused. A couple texted me privately like, did something happen between you and Haley?" So I explained what went down, and most of them said she was overreacting. But one of them, Vanessa, said, "I kinda get it though. When you're insecure and finally make a bold move, you want your friends to hype you up?" Maybe she just needed that energy. That made me feel a little guilty. I started wondering if maybe I was being too blunt. I'm not a super rah-rah type of person. I show support by being steady and honest, not by shouting compliments. But Haley's the type who thrives on validation. I guess I underestimated how important that moment was for her. A few days later, she unfollowed me on Instagram. I didn't say anything, but it hurt. After all our years of friendship, it felt so childish. Then last week, she posted a photo of herself wearing the skirt. The caption said, "Wearing what makes me feel beautiful. No matter who doesn't clap." I just stared at it for a long time, feeling weirdly sad. Not angry. Just sad that something so small could unravel a decade-long friendship. I texted her once more after that. Just to clear the air, I said, "Haley, I really wasn't trying to make you feel bad. You looked great in the skirt, and I thought you knew that. I didn't realize you needed me to express it differently. I'm sorry if I came off cold." She replied an hour later with, "Thanks for saying that. I just needed you to see me. I guess we express things differently. That was it. We haven't talked since. I've gone back and forth about it a lot since then. Part of me gets it. Confidence is fragile, and maybe she really did need that extra hype. But another part of me can't help feeling like I shouldn't have to perform emotional theater to prove I care. If our friendship hinges on whether I say, 'You look hot, Queen,' versus, 'That's a nice color,' maybe we're not as close as I thought. But still, I keep thinking about that text. I just needed you to see me. It's been looping in my head for days. Maybe she wasn't really talking about the skirt. Maybe she was talking about everything else. How she's changed. How she wants to be seen differently. And maybe I missed my chance to show her I noticed. I don't know. Maybe this is one of those things where no one's totally wrong, but no one's totally right either. All I know is, next time a friend steps out of their comfort zone, even for something as simple as a skirt, I'll try to meet them where they are. Even if it means being a little more rah-rah than usual. Because sometimes, cute skirt isn't about the skirt at all. It's about being seen. Update. It's been about 6 weeks since the whole skirt incident, and honestly, I didn't expect it to linger this long. I figured Haley just needed space, maybe a little time to cool off, and that we'd eventually meet up again like nothing happened. But instead, things took this weird turn where our entire friend group kind of split into factions without anyone saying it out loud. After that cryptic Instagram post, Haley started hanging out more with Vanessa and a few girls from her gym. I'd still see her stories. Lots of brunches, self-love captions, motivational quotes about removing negative energy. It wasn't directly about me, but the timing was always suspicious, like one of them said. When people show you they don't clap for you, stop performing for them, another one said. Energy vampires can't stand your glow-up. I didn't respond or react. I didn't even unfollow her. I just muted her stories because seeing them felt like picking at a scab. Meanwhile, a couple of our mutual friends, Mark and Julia, started inviting me to hangouts without her. It wasn't meant to be shady, they just said. We don't want drama. Still, it felt awkward. There was this unspoken tension in the group chats now, like everyone was walking on eggshells trying not to take sides. About 2 weeks ago, Julia mentioned Haley's name while we were grabbing coffee. She said, "I think she really misses you." She just won't admit it. That threw me off. Misses me? She unfollowed me, Julia. She's made it clear she doesn't even want to talk to me. Julia sighed and said, "You know, Haley, everything's emotional with her." She told me she felt unsupported when she was trying to grow into a new version of herself. I think she wanted you to be proud of her the way she's always been proud of you. I didn't know how to respond. Proud of me? For what? Haley and I have always had this friendly competitiveness. Careers, relationships, style. We're both stubborn and independent, so the idea that she saw me as someone whose approval she needed kind of broke my heart a little. A few days later, Haley actually texted me. Out of nowhere, it just said, "Hey, I know things have been weird. I was cleaning my closet and found the pink skirt. Thought about you. It caught me off guard." I stared at that message for like 5 minutes before replying. I said, "Hey, yeah, things have been weird. I'm glad you still wear it. It looked good on you," she replied. "Thanks. I know I overreacted that day. I wanted to feel celebrated. I know that sounds silly." That was the first time she'd acknowledged it, and I swear I felt this rush of relief. We texted for a while after that, slowly at first, but it felt easy again. She said she'd been working with a therapist on her confidence and learning not to tie her self-worth to how others react. I told her I was learning how to express warmth better, even if it doesn't come naturally. Then she said something that really hit me. "When I tried on that skirt, I wanted to see your eyes light up because that would mean you saw me differently. Not as the girl who hides behind jeans and sarcasm, but as someone trying to change when you didn't. It felt like you didn't see me at all." That's when I realized this wasn't about the skirt. It was about validation, identity, and the weird unspoken ways friends evolve. We decided to meet for lunch the next weekend. It was a little awkward at first. Lots of polite smiles, small talk, but eventually the ice melted. She apologized again, and I did too, she said. I shouldn't have made it public. That was immature, I told her. It's okay. I could have been more supportive. I just didn't realize you needed a cheerleader in that moment. She smiled and said, "You were always the calm one." I guess I wanted to be seen by someone who didn't need validation to exist. I think I took your quietness as disapproval. That kind of summed us up perfectly. She thrives on energy and words. I live in subtle gestures. We're different. But that difference is what made our friendship work for so long. At one point, she pulled out her phone and showed me a photo she took in that skirt. This time, no filter, no quotes, just her smiling. She said, "I wore it last week to a date. The guy said I looked confident. Not cute, confident." I think I finally get what that means. We both laughed and it felt normal again. After lunch, she gave me a hug and said, "I missed my best friend." It wasn't dramatic or emotional, just simple, genuine. Since then, we've been texting again, sending memes, complaining about work like old times. The group chat's alive again too, which is nice. No more passive-aggressive quotes. No cryptic posts. Looking back, I think we both learned something important. She learned that not everyone expresses love with loud words, and I learned that sometimes saying the extra nice thing isn't fake. It's a small gesture that can mean the world to someone who needs to hear it. It's kind of wild how one skirt, one silly piece of clothing, managed to stir up so much buried stuff between us. But maybe that's what friendships are supposed to do. Stretch, evolve, survive the weird tests. The last time I saw her, she was wearing that same pink skirt again. Sipping a latte and laughing at something stupid I said, and in that moment I realized we'd come full circle. Not every friendship survives a fight like that. But ours did, and maybe we're stronger for it. Final update. It's been almost 6 months since the whole skirt fiasco first blew up, and I honestly never expected that something so small could change the entire rhythm of a friendship. But here we are. This is probably my last update, because I feel like the story's finally come full circle. After that lunch where Haley and I patched things up, things between us slowly went back to something that felt normal. Not exactly the way they used to be. More like a new version of normal, one with better boundaries and a lot more understanding. We text again, we see each other a couple of times a month, and we've even started to joke about the skirt saga. She'll tease me by saying, "Careful, don't give me another lukewarm compliment." And I'll reply, "You look phenomenally average, queen." Then we laugh and move on. But the truth is, that situation changed both of us more than either of us wanted to admit at first. For Haley, it kicked off this whole self-reflection journey. She started seeing her therapist regularly, got back into journaling, and even took a break from social media for a while. She told me one day, "I realized I was chasing approval like it was oxygen. I kept posting things hoping people would clap, and when they didn't, it felt like rejection." She said that realizing that was both humiliating and freeing. For me, it was more subtle. I had to admit that I sometimes hide behind being the logical friend. I like to think I'm level-headed, practical, calm, but that can also come off as distant. And when someone like Haley, who leads with emotion, reaches out for connection, my quietness can look like indifference. I've started trying to be more verbal about my appreciation for people. It still feels a little awkward sometimes, but I've realized that saying "I'm proud of you" or "that's awesome" doesn't cost anything. And sometimes, it means more than I think. A couple months after we reconciled, Haley invited me to her birthday dinner. It was the first big group event we'd both been at since the fallout. I was honestly nervous. There'd been tension in our friend group for months, and I wasn't sure how things would feel. But when I got there, she hugged me right away, like a full, tight, genuine hug, and yes, she was wearing the pink skirt. It was actually kinda poetic. She looked great, confident, comfortable, happy, and when I complimented her outfit, she laughed and said, "You're just saying that so I don't write another passive-aggressive post." I said, "Maybe, but you do look great." And this time, her smile was real, not fishing for approval, not testing me, just pure gratitude. Later in the night, when everyone else was laughing and taking photos, she leaned over and said quietly, "You know what's funny? That skirt used to make me feel like I had to prove something. Now I just wear it because I like it." That stuck with me, because it made me realize how much that fight had really been about growth. Hers, mine, both of ours. About a month later, she told me she was applying for a managerial role at her job, something she'd been hesitant to do for years because she didn't think she was put together enough. I helped her polish her resume and even did a mock interview with her over coffee. When she got the job, she called me screaming with excitement, and without even thinking, I yelled back, "I'm so proud of you." She got quiet for a second and said, "See? You can do the emotional thing." We both laughed so hard that people in the cafe turned to look. It sounds silly, but that moment felt like closure. Like we'd both come out of that ridiculous skirt drama as slightly better, more aware people. The funny part? That skirt kind of became her lucky charm. She wore it on her first day at the new job. She wore it again when she went on a second date with this guy named Adam, who, by the way, seems genuinely great for her. When she told me about him, she said, "He actually listened when I talked about my work. I didn't have to perform. It felt easy." And then she said, "I think you'd like him." So last weekend we all went out. Me, Haley, Adam, and a few friends, to the same outdoor cafe we used to haunt in college. She introduced me to him as the friend who taught me that honesty can sound like love. That caught me off guard. I asked what she meant, and she said, "I used to think support meant hype, but you showed me it can also mean honesty, patience, and showing up even when things get messy." It's weird how something that started with a skirt and a misunderstanding about a compliment led to one of the most real, humbling lessons about friendship I've ever had. We've both changed, not in a dramatic movie montage way, but in quiet ways. I notice when someone needs a little extra kindness. She doesn't depend on others to validate her worth. We meet in the middle now. I try to be warmer. She tries to be less performative. and somehow that balance works. There's this photo from her birthday dinner that someone took. Me, Haley, and a few of our friends laughing around the table. She's in her pink skirt. I'm holding a glass of wine, and we're both mid-laugh. It's one of those candid moments where everything looks easy and light. She posted it later with the caption, "Some friendships are worth growing through awkward phases for." I didn't comment or react. I just smiled when I saw it, because this time, I didn't need to say anything. She knew I saw her, and that, I think, was the point all along. Stories number 8. My date called me too masculine for paying for my own meal. So I walked out. I don't usually post on Reddit, but I had one of those "is this real life?" moments that I can't stop replaying in my head. I 29F went on what was supposed to be a normal first date with a guy I met through a friend of a friend. His name was Brandon 31M. He seemed normal enough when we texted. Funny, a bit sarcastic, but not rude. We met through my coworker Mia, who's dating his roommate. She told me he was a little old-fashioned but sweet once you get to know him. That should have been my first clue. We decided to meet at this cozy Italian place downtown, the kind that's dimly lit with a ton of plants hanging from the ceiling and the faint sound of live jazz. I got there about 5 minutes early, which I always do, and he showed up a few minutes after me. He looked like his photos, tall, dark hair, decent smile. And at first glance, he seemed confident, but not arrogant. He shook my hand, which I thought was a little formal for a date, but whatever, and we sat down. The conversation started off fine. He talked a lot about his job in real estate, and I asked questions, genuinely trying to be engaged. But I started noticing little things that rubbed me the wrong way. Every time I tried to add something to the conversation, he'd interrupt with some fun fact that only vaguely connected to what I said. Like I mentioned that I'd just moved into a new apartment, and instead of asking where or how it was going, he launched into a story about how women are always overpaying for rent because they don't know how to negotiate. That was strike one. I let it slide, thinking maybe he didn't mean it the way it came out. I've dealt with that "let me educate you" energy before, and sometimes it's just nerves disguised as over-talking. But it didn't stop there. When the waiter came, I ordered pasta and a glass of wine, and he ordered steak and whiskey, normal. But when the waiter left, he smirked and said, "I like that you eat real food. Most girls I date just pick at a salad." I laughed politely, but inside, I felt this weird discomfort. It wasn't even what he said. It was how he said it. Like he was evaluating me. Like eating normally was some kind of test. Then, somewhere between appetizers and the main course, the conversation turned to relationships. He started talking about how modern dating has ruined women. I remember freezing for a second and asking, "What do you mean by that?" He leaned back all smug and said, "Well, women don't act like women anymore. Everyone's trying to be the man now, making more money, paying for dates, leading everything. It's like there's no femininity left." I wish I could say I was shocked, but honestly, part of me wasn't. It explained everything. The weird tone, the educating, the slight condescension. I took a sip of my wine and said calmly, "So you prefer women who don't work, or what?" He laughed. No, I love a woman with a career. But I also think there should be balance. A woman should let a man lead. It's just biology, you know? Men are the protectors and providers. I remember sitting there thinking, this man probably reads Instagram quotes and thinks he's a philosopher. But I didn't argue. Not yet. I wanted to see where this went. Maybe for the sake of curiosity. So I asked him, "So if you believe in traditional roles, does that mean you always pay for the date?" He smiled and said, "Of course. I don't let a woman touch the check. That's my job. Cool, fine, whatever." But when the check did come, he looked at it, paused dramatically, and said, "You know what, actually? How about we split this one? It's only fair." The switch was so sudden I thought I'd misheard. I laughed a little and said, "Didn't you just say it's your job to pay?" He smirked again. "Well, you seem like the type who wants equality, right? Might as well live it." That was strike 2 and 3. All in one go, something in me snapped, not in an angry way. More like clarity hitting me all at once. I didn't raise my voice, didn't make a scene. I just calmly said, "Sure, let's split it." The waiter came back, and when I handed over my card, Brandon gave me this patronizing grin and said, "That's cute. Most women pretend they want equality but still expect men to pay." I looked him dead in the eye and said, "It's not cute. It's called having self-respect." His smirk faded a little, but he didn't say anything. After the check was paid, he leaned forward and said, "You know, You kind of give off masculine energy, it's not bad. But it's a little much. I just blinked at him for a second. Then I stood up, grabbed my bag and said, if being treated like an equal makes me masculine, then I'll take that as a compliment. And then I walked out. He sat there speechless, which honestly was the highlight of the night. I called an Uber and waited outside, feeling this mix of annoyance and empowerment. I wasn't sad or embarrassed, I was actually relieved. Like I'd dodged something heavy before it could fall on me. On the ride home, I texted Mia, my coworker, and told her how it went. She immediately called me and started apologizing profusely, saying she had no idea he was like that. Apparently, her boyfriend Ryan had mentioned that Brandon had strong opinions about gender roles, but she thought that just meant he was traditional. Traditional. My ass, I got home, poured myself another glass of wine, and laughed about it with my roommate Jess. She said, girl, if he's threatened by you paying for your own meal, imagine how he'd act if you got a promotion before him. She was right. The whole night just confirmed something I've been noticing more and more. There's a type of guy who says he wants a strong, independent woman but can't handle what that actually looks like in practice. They think they want confidence until it's directed at them. I posted about it in a group chat with some friends, and everyone agreed I did the right thing. One of them even told me she once had a guy tell her he missed the days when women didn't work. Like, sir, are we supposed to churn butter and wait for your paycheck? I've dated my fair share of weirdos, but this one just felt like a snapshot of something bigger. This insecurity some men have when they meet women who don't need them for financial or emotional stability. They want to feel indispensable, and when they realize they aren't, they lash out in subtle, manipulative ways. Anyway, a few days later, Brandon texted me. His message said, you didn't have to storm off like that, I was just joking. First of all, I didn't storm off, I left calmly. Second, when someone says something degrading and then calls it a joke, that's just code for I don't want to take responsibility. So, I replied, you don't need to explain. We clearly have different values, best of luck. He didn't respond after that. I thought that would be the end of it, but apparently, he told Ryan, his roommate, that I overreacted. Ryan told Mia, who told me, Ryan said Brandon was shocked that I actually left and that most girls would have just laughed it off. And that's exactly the problem, isn't it? People laugh things off so the guy doesn't feel uncomfortable, while the woman swallows her discomfort. Not me, not anymore. In the days after, I thought about how many times I've tolerated behavior like that just to avoid being rude. All the times I've smiled through sexist jokes or shrugged off microaggressions on dates, but walking out felt like reclaiming something. Like teaching my younger self that she never had to sit there and take it. I've gone on 2 more dates since then, both with guys who actually listened when I spoke and didn't make backhanded comments about femininity. I'm not saying they're perfect, but they treated me like an equal. And that's a baseline I won't negotiate anymore. Looking back, I'm weirdly grateful for that night, because it reminded me of something simple but powerful. Respect isn't up for debate. If someone tells you who they are, believe them. And if they show you they don't respect you, leave before your food gets cold. Update. I honestly didn't think this story would get any traction when I posted it. I just needed to vent about a cringy, frustrating date, but apparently the internet decided otherwise. Within a couple of days, the post blew up. People were sharing it on Twitter, Facebook, and even TikTok. Someone screenshotted it and titled it, "Girl walks out on sexist date like a boss." And suddenly my Reddit notifications were full of strangers calling me an icon, a queen, or saying I wish I had the confidence to do that. It was flattering, but also kind of overwhelming. I didn't write it for attention. I wrote it because I needed to get it off my chest. But seeing so many people, especially women, say they'd been through similar situations made me realize how common this kind of behavior really is. Then things got weird. Apparently Brandon saw the post. I didn't name him or share any identifying details. But the story spread locally because Mia, the coworker who introduced us, made the mistake of mentioning it to someone in her office. That someone connected the dots. Italian restaurant, real estate guy, mutual friends, and boom. Within a day, Brandon texted me. His first message said, "Wow, can't believe you put our private date on Reddit." I stared at my phone for a solid minute before replying. I didn't use your name, your job, or anything specific. No one would have known if you hadn't told people. He came back with, "Everyone knows it's about me. My phone's been blowing up. You made me look like an idiot." To be fair, I didn't make him look like anything. He did that himself, I replied. If you're embarrassed, maybe ask yourself why. That's when he sent a wall of text about how I misinterpreted everything, and how I'm just another woman trying to cancel a good guy for having an opinion. That phrase, a good guy for having an opinion, still makes me laugh. Because if your opinion is that women shouldn't pay for their own meals or be independent, it's not a controversial take. It's just outdated. I didn't respond after that. I blocked his number, muted him on social media. He wasn't on any of my accounts, but I wanted to be safe and figured that would be the end of it. Spoiler, it wasn't. A few days later, Mia told me that Brandon had been complaining to her boyfriend Ryan, saying I'd ruined his reputation. He even told Ryan that he could have liked me if I hadn't been so defensive. That last part made me laugh out loud. It's always the same story with guys like him. They're not sorry. They're just mad you didn't let them be the victim. But here's where things took an unexpected turn. Ryan actually stood up for me. He told Brandon, "Man, if your reputation is that fragile, maybe you need to rethink how you treat people." That apparently caused a bit of tension between them. But Ryan didn't care. He said Brandon's behavior embarrassed him. Too, Mia told me she was proud of Ryan. And honestly, I was impressed. Sometimes the bare minimum, calling out a friend's bad behavior, feels revolutionary. The next week, I went out for dinner with Mia and Jess, my roommate, and we ended up joking about how this random, ridiculous date had turned into some kind of feminist internet moment. I was half laughing, half cringing about the attention, when this girl from the table next to us leaned over and said, "Wait, are you the girl from that Reddit story?" I didn't even know how to respond at first. She said she'd read it on TikTok, where some creator had narrated the story over footage of someone walking out of a restaurant. She told me, "You're kind of a hero in my group chat." I laughed and said, "I'm not a hero. I just paid for my own pasta." We ended up talking for a bit, and she told me how she once sat through a similar date where the guy said, "I like that you're career-driven, but don't get too ambitious," she said. She wished she'd had the guts to leave. That conversation stuck with me, because it made me realize that walking out wasn't just about him. It was about unlearning that quiet, people-pleasing instinct we're taught to have. The one that tells us to smile, nod, and stay polite even when someone disrespects us. A few weeks later, things cooled down. The post stopped trending and life went back to normal. Or at least, mostly normal. I matched with a new guy on Bumble. Ethan, 33, works in tech, funny in a non-condescending way, and actually listens. When we went out for coffee, I mentioned without going into detail that I'd had a bad first date recently where someone made a weird comment about women. He said, "Let me guess. Something about being too independent?" I almost spit out my latte laughing. Turns out he'd also seen my Reddit post, but he didn't connect that it was me. When I admitted it was, he grinned and said, "That was you? You're kind of a legend." It was surprisingly not awkward. He told me he thought the story was hilarious, but also sad that it resonated with so many women. He said, "I don't get why some guys are so threatened by women having autonomy. It's not that deep. We've been dating casually since, and I have to say, the bar for decent behavior feels refreshingly low now. Ethan's just easy. He asks how I'm doing, listens, doesn't interrupt, doesn't make weird jokes about gender. We split bills sometimes, and other times he pays. Or I do. No one keeps score. It feels normal, equal, and light." Meanwhile, Brandon became a bit of a cautionary tale in our social circle. People started jokingly saying, "Don't go full Brandon." Apparently, he's been quieter lately, less arrogant. Maybe he learned something, maybe not, but I'm done worrying about it. What did surprise me, though, was how many men quietly reached out through DMs on Reddit, saying things like, "I didn't realize how uncomfortable some of my behavior might come off until I read your post." Or, "Thanks for putting it into perspective." I never expected that reaction. It made me think maybe conversations like this are worth having. Not just to vent, but to hold up a mirror. The other side of going viral was that some people did call me names, saying I humiliated him or that modern feminism is toxic. I ignored most of it. But one comment stuck with me. Someone wrote, "You didn't embarrass him, he embarrassed himself. You just refused to play along." That hit me hard, in the best way, because that's exactly it. For so long, women are conditioned to make bad behavior comfortable for others. We smooth it over, laugh it off, stay quiet to keep the peace. But peace that costs your self-respect isn't peace, it's submission. Now, when I talk to my friends about dating, I tell them, you don't owe anyone your time, your energy, or your silence just to appear nice. If someone calls you too much for expecting respect, that says more about their insecurity than your personality. Walking out of that date didn't make me bitter or angry. It made me free from second-guessing my worth, from worrying about being too independent, from feeling guilty about setting standards. And honestly, I think that's the part that resonated most online. Not that I paid for my own food, but that I finally stopped apologizing for not fitting someone else's idea of what a woman should be. Funny enough, I went back to that same Italian restaurant a few weeks ago. Not for a date, just dinner with Jess after work. The waiter who'd served us that night was there. And when he brought over our food, he said, "You were the one who walked out on that guy, right?" I froze, embarrassed. But then he smiled and said, "That was the smoothest exit I've ever seen. The whole staff was rooting for you." Apparently, after I left, Brandon sat there for a good 10 minutes looking completely stunned before finally paying and leaving. The waiter said everyone in the back whispered, "Good for her." I laughed so hard I almost choked on my breadstick. So yeah, I guess the story came full circle. I didn't set out to make a statement, but maybe I did anyway. And if even one person reads it and decides to walk out of a situation that makes them feel small or disrespected, then it was worth every awkward message, every headline, every petty text, because the truth is simple. You don't owe anyone grace who refuses to give you respect. And if that makes me masculine, cold, or too independent, then I'll wear those labels proudly, right next to the badge of knowing my worth. Final update. It's been about 7 months since I wrote that post, and honestly, I still can't believe how much that one night, one ridiculous dinner, ended up reshaping so many parts of my life. I've had quiet nights since where I just sit in my apartment, scrolling through old messages and thinking, wow, I almost let that experience make me cynical. But instead, it did the opposite. It cracked something open in me. After my last update, life slowly slipped back to normal, or whatever my new version of normal became. I was still dating Ethan, still working at my marketing job, still grabbing brunch with Mia and Jess every other weekend, but there was a kind of quiet confidence I hadn't had before. I stopped overthinking everything I said or did. I started saying no without guilt. I stopped apologizing for things that didn't need apologies. It sounds small, but that's the kind of self-trust you only earn by walking away from something that disrespected you. Around month 3, Ethan and I decided to make things official. He's just solid. The kind of person who listens instead of waiting to talk. The first time I had a rough work day and snapped at him for something small, I immediately apologized, expecting tension. He just said, "It's okay, you're allowed to have bad days," and hugged me. No games, no passive-aggressive digs. It's weird how refreshing basic decency feels after years of settling for less. Speaking of work, remember my boss Lisa? The one who always told me to just play nice in meetings? She actually pulled me aside one day after that Reddit post went viral and said, "I read your story." My stomach dropped because I thought she was going to scold me. Instead she said, "You know, I used to put up with a lot of that kind of crap too. It's nice to see women aren't doing that anymore." Then she smiled. An actual, genuine smile, and said, "Good for you." That moment stuck with me. It's strange how many women have quietly endured this same kind of treatment. On dates, at work, everywhere. And how much of it we're just expected to absorb silently. I realized my story resonated not because it was unique, but because it was painfully common. The viral part, though, never completely went away. I still get DMs every once in a while, some supportive, some weird, a few from men asking for dating advice, which, bless their hearts, but I'm not a therapist. A few women reached out to tell me they finally walked out of a bad situation because they thought of my post. One girl said she left a first date after the guy made a joke about women being emotional drivers. She texted her friend, "I'm doing the pasta walkout," and I laughed so hard when I read that. Somehow, my impulsive moment of frustration became shorthand for self-respect. As for Brandon, believe it or not, I actually ran into him again. It was about 2 months ago at a friend's birthday party. He was standing by the bar, looking uncomfortable the second he saw me. I thought about ignoring him, but I decided to be civil. He said, "Hey, long time?" I nodded and said, "Yeah, guess so." He looked sheepish, very unlike the smug guy I remembered from that dinner. Then he said, "I owe you an apology. I didn't expect that." He told me the whole thing blew up his ego in ways he didn't see coming. Apparently, a few of his own friends called him out after the story went viral. He said, "I didn't realize how I came off. I thought I was being confident, but I was just being condescending," I just said. Well, it takes guts to admit that, he nodded. Said he was trying to work on himself. And that was it. No excuses, no dramatics. It wasn't some movie-worthy moment of closure. It was just two people acknowledging a past mistake and moving on. But it felt strangely freeing. I didn't need his apology. But hearing it helped close a chapter I didn't even realize was still open. A week later, Mia sent me a screenshot of a post from his Instagram story. Just a quote that said, "If you keep losing good women, maybe you're the problem." And she texted me, "Redemption arc unlocked, maybe, who knows." What surprised me most is how that one bad date ended up sparking conversations I didn't expect. I was invited onto a podcast about modern dating under a pseudonym to talk about the mental load women carry in relationships. It wasn't something I ever planned on doing, but it felt empowering to voice what so many of us quietly deal with. One thing I've learned through all this: self-respect doesn't always feel dramatic or bold. Sometimes it looks like quietly paying your bill, standing up, and walking away from someone who doesn't see your worth. And sometimes, that act ripples outward in ways you'll never fully see. These days, I don't even use dating apps as much. I've learned to be comfortable being alone, not lonely. But at peace, Ethan and I are still together. But if that ever changed, I know I'd be okay, because I finally trust myself to leave situations that make me shrink. Last weekend, I met up with a few of my girlfriends at the same Italian restaurant. We ordered the same pasta I had that night, purely for the symbolism. The waiter, same guy from before, recognized me and said, "Still my favorite customer story." We all laughed. Toasted to the pasta walkout, and went on about our night. But as I was walking home, I thought about how far I'd come from that anxious, people-pleasing version of myself who used to think being polite meant enduring things that hurt me. Now I know that boundaries aren't rude. They're self-care in action. Sometimes I think about the hundreds of messages from strangers saying, "I wish I had the courage to do what you did." And I wish I could tell each of them, "You do. It's already inside you." It just takes one moment of clarity to remember that you're allowed to protect your peace. If I learned anything from all this, it's that confidence isn't born from being perfect. It's built from refusing to let the world make you small. So yeah, maybe I'll always be the girl who walked out on the date. But if that's my legacy, I'll take it. Because that night, I didn't just walk away from a guy. I walked toward a version of myself I didn't know I could be. And she's someone I'm really proud of. Stories number 9. My husband canceled my birthday dinner to help his sister move. I turned 32 last weekend, and it was supposed to be a good day. I'm not big on parties or surprises, but I love quiet celebrations. I'd made a reservation weeks in advance at this little Italian place near the water, our favorite spot. My husband Jake and I go there every year for anniversaries or birthdays. It's kind of our thing. I even got a new dress for it. Something simple but nice. I was really looking forward to that night, especially after how stressful the last few months have been. The morning of my birthday, everything was normal. Jake woke up early, kissed me on the forehead, and told me happy birthday before heading to the gym. He said he'd be back around lunch so we could hang out before dinner. I spent the morning cleaning a bit, playing music, and answering birthday messages from friends. Around noon, Jake texted me, "Hey, slight change in plans. Sarah needs help moving today. Her movers bailed. I'll go help and be back by 5 so we can still make dinner." I wasn't thrilled, but I understood. His sister Sarah is recently divorced and moved into a new apartment across town. She's had a tough year, and I've always tried to be patient with that. So I said, okay. 5 o'clock came, no Jake. I called him, and he said they were almost done. 6 o'clock, nothing. Our reservation was at 7:30. I texted him asking if we were still good to go. He replied, "I'm trying to wrap up. She's missing a box and freaking out. I'll call you in a bit." That bit turned into 2 hours. By the time he got home, it was almost 9. My makeup was still on, my hair was done, and I was sitting on the couch with cold takeout pasta I'd ordered for myself. He walked in looking exhausted and said, "I'm so sorry, babe. It just took way longer than I thought." I stared at him for a second and said, "You could have texted, you could have called the restaurant," he said. "I didn't think it'd matter since we can go another night." That's when I got angry. "It's my birthday, Jake. This was the night. You didn't even try to make it work." He looked surprised, like he couldn't understand why I was upset. Sarah really needed help. What was I supposed to do, tell her no? I said, "Yes, you could have told her no today, or asked someone else to help, or told her you'd come after dinner. You chose her over me on my birthday." He sighed and said, "You're making this about you when she's going through something serious. It's just dinner." That line, "it's just dinner," was the last straw. I went to our bedroom, shut the door, and cried like a kid. It wasn't about the food. It was about feeling like an afterthought. He apologized later that night, but it was half-hearted. The next morning, I found out Sarah had posted pictures on Facebook. She and her friends, yes, she had other people helping, were drinking wine and laughing while Jake assembled furniture in the background. So not only was it not some dire situation, it looked like he'd just been roped into doing the heavy lifting while everyone else hung out. When I showed him the post, he got defensive. "You're making it seem like I did something terrible. I was helping family. You're blowing this out of proportion." I didn't yell. I just said, "You didn't even tell her it was my birthday. Did you?" He hesitated before saying, "I didn't want her to feel bad." That told me everything I needed to know. For the rest of the weekend, things were tense. He kept trying to downplay it, saying I was being dramatic. But every time I think about that night, the empty table, the candles, the food I'd been excited to eat, it just hurts all over again. I told my mom what happened, and she was furious. She said, "Honey, if your father ever did that to me, he'd be sleeping in the car." My best friend Kelly called it emotional stupidity, which made me laugh through tears. Sarah ended up calling me a few days later. She said, "I didn't know it was your birthday. Jake didn't tell me until after. I would have told him to go home." I could tell she was being sincere. She even said she felt awful about it. That made me even more frustrated, because it confirmed that Jake was trying to keep the peace with her at my expense. Since then, I've been pulling back emotionally. I don't trust that I'm a priority for him anymore. We've been together 8 years, married for 4, and I can't remember the last time he chose me when it came to his sister. It's always her first, me second. If she calls, he answers. No matter what we're doing, I've tried to be understanding because she's had a rough go of things. But I'm starting to feel invisible in my own marriage. A few nights ago, we finally talked again. Really talked. I told him, "You didn't just miss dinner. You missed showing up for me. You keep acting like I'm competing with your sister, and I don't want to live like that." He got quiet and said, "I didn't realize how much I've been putting her before you," I told him. "That's the problem. You didn't realize, and that's not a small thing." He said he'd make it up to me. But I told him it's not something you fix with one nice dinner or a bouquet of flowers. It's about how he chooses to show up moving forward. I don't know where we stand yet. I still love him. But I can't unsee how quick he was to cancel on me without even thinking twice. It made me realize that love isn't enough if someone doesn't value your time. Right now I'm staying with Kelly for a few days. I needed space to think. Jake's been texting me, saying he wants to talk in person. But I haven't decided when or if I'm ready. It's strange. Something as simple as a dinner reservation ended up showing me the cracks I'd been ignoring for years. Maybe it's not about one night, but about what that night revealed. It's been about 3 weeks since that night, and I finally feel like I can talk about what's happened since. I wish I could say things smoothed over quickly, but the truth is they didn't. What started as a fight about a missed dinner turned into a bigger conversation about our marriage. One we probably should have had years ago. After I spent a few days at Kelly's place, Jake kept texting me. He apologized over and over, saying he messed up and wanted to make it right. But I needed more than words. I told him I needed space, and for once, he actually respected that. No guilt trips, no surprise visits, just quiet. When I came back home a week later, things felt heavy. You know that strange silence when two people live in the same space but don't really feel like they're there together? That was us. A few nights in, Jake came into the kitchen while I was making tea and said, "Can we talk now?" We sat at the table. He had that look, tired but not defensive. I think he'd been stewing in his own guilt for a while. He started by saying, "I keep replaying that night in my head. The look on your face when I walked in, I can't shake it. I knew I'd hurt you. But I didn't realize how much until I saw you sitting there." I didn't say anything at first. I just let him talk. He admitted that he's always felt this unspoken obligation to his sister, Sarah. Their parents died when he was in college, and Jake basically stepped into that protector role. He said, "It's like I never stopped thinking she needed me. Even when she didn't, that made something click for me. I'd always thought he just didn't care enough to prioritize me. But it wasn't that simple. He's been carrying a lot of guilt and responsibility since he was 19, still. I told him that understanding why he does something doesn't make it hurt less when I'm on the receiving end. He nodded and said, "You're right. I've been treating you like you'll always be there no matter what. And that's not fair." We talked for a long time, like really talked. Not the surface level stuff we usually do after fights. He said that when Sarah called that morning, she sounded panicked, and he went into fix-it mode without thinking. I told him, "You're not her savior, Jake. You're her brother. It's okay to say no." He asked if I'd be open to therapy, both as a couple and for himself. I said yes, but I wanted to see follow-through before I believed it. And to his credit, he actually found a counselor and booked our first session. A week later, we went together. It was awkward at first, but it helped. The therapist pointed out something I hadn't even noticed. Jake doesn't just prioritize his sister, he prioritizes crisis management over emotional connection. He thrives on being the rescuer because it makes him feel useful, even if it costs him intimacy elsewhere. After that session, he got quiet in the car and said, "I've been treating love like a job instead of a relationship." I cried when he said that, because that was exactly how it felt. Like I was one more thing he needed to manage, not someone he wanted to choose. The next weekend, he asked if I'd let him plan something to make up for my birthday. At first, I wasn't sure. I didn't want some grand gesture. But he told me, "It's not about fixing it. I just want to show up right this time." So I said okay. He surprised me by driving out to this lake about an hour away. It's where we went the first summer we dated. He packed a picnic, got takeout from that same Italian restaurant we'd missed, and even brought a little cake. Nothing fancy, just us, the water, and some quiet. He didn't make speeches or promises. He just said, "I want to start doing better at being your partner." Not your apology. That hit me harder than I expected. Since then, things have been different. Not perfect, but more intentional. He's been setting boundaries with Sarah, which honestly shocked me. The first time she called asking him to come fix her leaky sink, he said, "I can come by Sunday, but not tonight. I've got plans with Marissa." That's me. And he said it without guilt or defensiveness. I actually teared up when I heard it. Sarah's been understanding too. She even texted me saying, "I told Jake I didn't realize how much I leaned on him. I'll start figuring things out on my own." That meant a lot coming from her. Therapy's been tough but good. We've both had to face stuff we ignored for too long. Him with his savior complex, me with my tendency to minimize my own feelings to keep the peace. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like we're on the same team again. Last night, Jake looked at me and said, "You know, if you hadn't gotten mad, I might have kept doing this forever," I told him. "I wasn't mad because you helped her. I was mad because you forgot me." He nodded, took my hand and said, "I won't forget again. I don't know what the future looks like yet. I'm not naive enough to think one picnic and a few therapy sessions fix everything. But we're rebuilding, slowly. And that's something." That night he missed dinner. I felt small and invisible now. For the first time in a long time I feel seen. Maybe that's the quiet kind of love that lasts, not the loud gestures, but the steady effort afterward. It's been almost 6 months since my last update. And I can finally say things between Jake and me have found a rhythm again. One that actually feels healthy this time. I didn't think I'd ever get here. I'm not saying everything's perfect, but the balance we've created feels real. Earned and calm in a way it never was before. After a few more months of therapy, something shifted in how we communicate. Jake stopped reacting defensively when I brought things up. Instead, he started listening, not just hearing words, but actually sitting with them. He began asking questions like, "What can I do differently next time?" Or, "Do you want me to fix this or just hear you out?" It sounds small, but that kind of awareness changed everything. The biggest change, though, came from how he handles Sarah now. He's still there for her, but it's not at the cost of our marriage. I think therapy helped him realize that taking care of his sister didn't mean sacrificing the relationship he built with me. He set clear boundaries, like only helping her with big stuff on weekends and not dropping plans with me to rush over whenever she called. At first, Sarah struggled with that. She's used to Jake being her safety net, but over time, she started figuring things out on her own. She got promoted at work, met a guy she's been seeing, and honestly, she's doing great. We've even started getting along better, which is something I never thought would happen. She invited both of us over for dinner a few weeks ago, and it didn't feel tense at all. Jake and I have continued therapy, but we've moved from weekly sessions to once a month. It's more of a check-in now than crisis control. I've learned that I also had my part in how things used to be. I'd avoid conflict to keep the peace, but that only built resentment. Now, I speak up when something's off. I don't bottle things until I explode. It's uncomfortable sometimes, but it's made me feel stronger. One of the biggest moments came on my birthday this year, exactly a year after the original mess. Jake told me to keep the evening free but didn't tell me why. I'll admit, part of me was nervous. Birthdays had become this sore spot for us, but he picked me up after work, and we drove to the same Italian restaurant we were supposed to go to last year. Same table, same view of the water, even the same dessert I'd missed out on. He handed me a small box. Inside was a simple silver bracelet with a tiny charm shaped like a candle. He said, "I can't undo last year, but I can make sure you never feel like you're waiting for me again." It was perfect. Not flashy or over the top, just thoughtful and honest. I cried right there in the middle of the restaurant. That night felt like the closure I didn't realize I still needed. Not because he bought something shiny, but because it was the first time he understood exactly what I'd been trying to say all along. Love isn't about showing up eventually. It's about showing up when it matters. Since then, things have been steady. We go on walks together after dinner most nights. We've been planning a small trip to Portland in the spring. Sometimes we still argue. Every couple does. But the arguments end with understanding now. Not walls. I've also started doing more for myself. I joined a pottery class with Kelly, and I've been spending more time with friends. I used to wait for Jake to fill every gap in my life, but I'm realizing that's too much to ask of anyone. A relationship shouldn't mean losing your independence. It should mean sharing it. Jake noticed that shift too. He told me recently, "You seem lighter." I think it's because for the first time, I'm not walking on eggshells or keeping score. I'm just living. And he's meeting me there. Looking back, I can see that the night he missed my birthday wasn't just a fight. It was a breaking point. It forced both of us to look at the kind of marriage we'd built and decide whether it was worth rebuilding. And it was. But not because we loved each other enough, because we were finally willing to put in the work. The irony is, if you saw us now, you'd never guess we almost fell apart over a missed dinner. But I think that's how most relationships work in real life. It's never just about one thing. It's about what that thing represents. For me, that night represented feeling unseen. For him, it represented old habits he didn't know how to break. Now, when I think of that empty table and the cold pasta I ate alone, it doesn't sting anymore. It just feels like a different lifetime. Because it was this version of us, it's quieter, humbler, more intentional. We still have work to do. Everyone does. But when Jake looks at me now, I can tell he's present. And that's worth more than any big apology or fancy dinner. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that forgiveness isn't about forgetting what hurt you. It's about watching someone become the version of themselves you always hoped they could be. And knowing you did the same. So yeah, he missed my birthday once. But since then, he hasn't missed me. And that's all I ever really wanted. Stories number 10. My ex's mother lost it when I told her my daughter and I wouldn't be coming to her Christmas gathering. Alright, so some context because this one's a little tangled. I 32F have a 6-year-old daughter named Lily, and my ex, Jason 35M. And I broke up about 3 years ago after a 5-year relationship. We were never married, but we share custody of Lily, 50-50 split. Week on, week off kind of thing. Jason and I ended things mostly because of his inability to grow up. He's one of those guys who always wants to be the fun dad, but when it comes to responsibility or boundaries, he checks out. He's not a bad father, but he's unreliable. He cancels last minute, shows up late, forgets to pack Lily's stuff for school. You get the idea. The only reason things haven't gone totally off the rails is because his mom, Diane 62F, is basically the glue holding that side of the family together. She's actually been wonderful to Lily. She picks her up from preschool when Jason's working, helps her with homework, takes her to piano lessons. She's that sweet, over-involved grandma type who loves baking cookies and decorating for holidays like it's a full-time job. And that brings me to the whole Christmas situation. For the past few years since the breakup, Diane has always invited me to her family's Christmas dinner. It started because that first year, Lily was spending the holiday with Jason's side, and Diane didn't want me to be alone. It was kind, and honestly, I appreciated it. I went, brought gifts, even helped in the kitchen. It was awkward at times. Jason and his new girlfriend showed up halfway through that first Christmas. But I pushed through it for Lily's sake. Year 2 was similar, except by then, Jason and his girlfriend, Brooke, were more serious, and that Christmas, yeah, it was rough. Diane tried to seat me next to Jason, probably trying to keep things comfortable for Lily. But it just made the whole dinner weird. Brooke kept giving me these tight little smiles. Jason was visibly uncomfortable, and I ended up leaving early under the excuse that Lily was tired. After that, I decided I wasn't going to keep doing this out of obligation. So this year, when Diane called in late November to invite me again, I politely said, "I really appreciate it. but I think Lily and I will just do our own Christmas this year. We're trying to build our own traditions." There was a long pause, and then she said, "Oh, so you're not coming at all?" I said, "No. I think it's time we make new memories at home. But thank you for thinking of us." Her tone completely changed. "You're really going to keep Lily away from her family on Christmas?" I explained that Lily would still see everyone. Jason was supposed to have her Christmas Eve this year, and we'd trade off in the morning. But Diane didn't like that answer. She said, No, we always open gifts together as a family on Christmas morning." "You can come too, like always," I said. "I don't think it's appropriate anymore, Diane. I'm not part of that family." And that's when she got snippy. She said, "Well, you were happy to be part of the family when we were helping you raise her. You don't just cut people off because you feel awkward now." That stung, because yes, she's helped a lot. But I've also done everything for Lily as a single mom. Doctor's appointments, school forms, nights up with fevers. Things Diane never had to deal with. I told her, "I'm not cutting anyone off. I just want my daughter to have a peaceful Christmas, without all the weird tension." Diane snapped back. "The only one making it weird is you, sweetheart. Brooke doesn't mind you being here." Which was definitely a lie, because Brooke has made it very clear she minds. I tried to stay calm. I said, "I think this conversation's getting heated. Let's just agree that Lily will have a good time no matter what, okay?" Diane sighed dramatically and said, "I guess I'll have to explain to everyone why you and Lily don't think we're good enough anymore." Then she hung up. I didn't think much of it until a few days later when Jason called me out of the blue. Angry, "Why are you trying to start drama with my mom?" he said. "She's upset. She thinks you're keeping Lily away from her," I said. "Jason, that's not what's happening. You have her Christmas Eve. You can bring her to your mom's then." "I'm not stopping anything," he said. "You know how much this means to my mom. Why can't you just suck it up for one day?" I laughed, not a mean laugh, just that tired mom laugh you do when you've had enough, and said, "Because Jason, it's not my job to manage your mom's emotions anymore. I'm not part of that family. I'm Lily's mom." That's it. He muttered something about me being bitter and hung up. Since then, Diane's been doing this passive-aggressive thing. She sent Lily a card with a note that said, "Grandma will miss you this Christmas. I hope your mommy lets you call me." That one hit a nerve. I didn't show it to Lily, obviously. But it really bothered me that she was trying to guilt-trip me through my kid. I tried to let it go. But then mutual friends started telling me Diane was complaining to everyone about how cold I've become, how I'm trying to erase them from Lily's life. It's completely untrue. Lily spends plenty of time with her dad's side. I just want to spend Christmas in my own home for once, without being treated like some awkward ex invited out of pity. It's not like I haven't been civil. I've always encouraged Lily to call her grandma, send cards, visit when it's Jason's week. I've never once said a bad word about them in front of her. But apparently me saying no once has made me the villain. Lily asked me the other day, "Mommy, why is Grandma sad I'm not going to her Christmas?" I just told her, "Because Grandma loves you a lot, but we'll see her another time." She nodded and said, "That's okay. Can we bake cookies and stay in pajamas all day?" And that right there made up my mind. That's what I want for her: peace, warmth, no tension. Just a simple Christmas morning where we wake up, drink hot cocoa, and open presents in our own living room. Jason texted again this week, asking if I'd reconsider. I told him no, politely but firmly. He tried guilt-tripping me again. "You know how much this means to Mom." But I didn't budge, I told him. "You're her son. It's your job to make sure she has a nice Christmas, not mine." He didn't respond. Honestly, I don't feel bad anymore. Diane means well, but she doesn't understand boundaries. She's used to controlling family dynamics, and now that I'm not part of that web, she's struggling with it. I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm just done sacrificing my peace to make everyone else comfortable. If that makes me the bad guy in their story, so be it. Update. It's been about a month since that first tense phone call with Diane, and things have been interesting to say the least. I knew telling her no would ruffle some feathers, but I didn't realize just how far she'd go to try to manipulate the situation. So, after our initial conversation, she started calling Lily several times a week. At first I thought, okay, maybe she just misses her granddaughter, but the calls were odd. Every time Lily picked up, Diane would immediately start talking about how sad she was, that Lily wasn't coming to Christmas, how she was hurt and confused. She even said things like, "I guess some people just don't appreciate family." Lily would say, "Grandma, I told you I'll see you another day." And Diane would sigh dramatically. Honestly, it was like a tiny emotional storm cloud being sent straight at my kid. I had to step in a few times, gently explaining that it wasn't Lily's fault and that Grandma needed to calm down. I hate that my daughter had to deal with that. Meanwhile, Jason kept texting me, alternating between trying to guilt trip me and trying to reason with me. He said things like, "Mom's heartbroken. Can't you just let it go for one day? And Lily will miss the family tradition if you insist on this." I reminded him politely that Lily would see them plenty and that our family traditions at home were important too. One afternoon, Diane showed up at Lily's school unannounced. She claimed she just wanted to drop off a little early Christmas gift. I told her firmly she needed to schedule visits through me or Jason. "Not show up unannounced," she huffed, gave me a long look and said, "I guess you really mean it when you say no." I didn't argue. I just handed Lily's bag back and reminded her to coordinate with Jason for future visits. That moment really drove home that this wasn't just about Christmas. Diane is used to having control over family events, and me asserting boundaries completely disrupted that dynamic. I felt bad for her. She genuinely loves Lily. But I also realized that letting her steamroll me would only reinforce unhealthy patterns. Meanwhile, Lily has been amazing through all of this. She's excited about making her own Christmas memories at home. We've been decorating early, baking cookies, and making little traditions that feel special just to us. She even told me, "Mommy, I like our Christmas the best because it's cozy and fun." That kind of reassurance makes the stress from Diane and Jason much easier to handle. Over the past couple of weeks, I've had a few heart-to-heart conversations with Jason. I reminded him that we co-parent, but boundaries are essential, he admitted, half-jokingly, that he didn't realize how overbearing his mom could be when she got Christmas fever. He also admitted that part of him feels guilty because she's trying so hard to be involved, but I reminded him that guilt doesn't get to dictate our choices. Interestingly, after a little time and some cooling off, Diane has started softening her tone a bit. She still texts Lily, but now it's more about sharing fun little activities or holiday crafts instead of guilt-laden speeches. I think the first wave of confrontation really got her to realize she can't use emotional pressure to manipulate the situation. I also realized something important in all of this. Setting boundaries doesn't make me a villain. It doesn't mean I love my daughter any less. It just means I'm teaching her that it's okay to protect her space, and that we can enjoy holidays without toxic tension. Jason seems to be understanding that now too. He said he's going to make sure Diane doesn't overstep again and that he'll communicate better with me about visits. That gives me hope that moving forward, Lily can maintain her relationship with her grandma without being caught in the middle of adult drama. So, while it was stressful at first, I think this whole situation has actually strengthened my parenting and my ability to advocate for Lily. I feel more confident now in saying what's best for her without worrying about upsetting adults who should understand boundaries. The real victory? Lily keeps telling me how much she loves our little Christmas traditions, and she's genuinely happy. And honestly, that's all that matters. Final update. It's been almost 2 months since that first tense conversation with Diane about Christmas, and I think everything has finally settled down. Honestly, I didn't expect the situation to stretch on this long, but I've learned a lot about boundaries, co-parenting, and how to protect my daughter from adult drama. After the initial shockwaves, Diane's guilt-laden texts, unannounced visits, and Jason's attempts at guilt-tripping, things gradually started to normalize. Diane has adjusted her behavior. She still texts Lily, but it's no longer loaded with passive-aggressive undertones or disappointment. Instead, she sends fun little messages about holiday crafts, baking, or a funny story about her cat. Lily actually laughs at these and responds happily. I realized that the first confrontations forced Diane to reflect on how she was communicating, and I'm proud of her for adjusting without needing me to be the bad cop. Jason has been more cooperative as well. He admitted that he hadn't realized how controlling his mom could get during family holidays, and he's been making an effort to set boundaries on her behalf. He called me one evening and said, "I get it now. I shouldn't let Mom guilt you, and Lily deserves a peaceful holiday no matter what." It was the first time in months that he took ownership instead of blaming me, and it felt like a turning point. As for Lily, she has been thriving. We've created our own little traditions, and it's been beautiful to watch her excitement. She's helped decorate the tree, baked cookies, and even picked out ornaments for a memory tree where we hang photos of our favorite moments from the year. She told me one night as we sipped cocoa by the fireplace, "Mommy, I think our Christmas is the best because we make it together." That hit me harder than anything Diane or Jason said, because it reminded me why I had made these boundaries in the first place. On Christmas morning, we had our cozy little celebration. Lily opened gifts, we laughed, and it felt calm and joyous. Later that day, Jason brought Lily to Diane's for a short visit. I stayed out of it because I wanted Lily to enjoy her grandma's company without tension. When Lily came back, she was beaming and told me about the cookies they baked and the stories Diane read. There were no tears, no guilt trips, no drama, just Lily having fun with her grandma. That, to me, felt like the ultimate win. I've also noticed a subtle shift in my own perspective. Setting boundaries doesn't make me a villain. It doesn't mean I'm selfish or that I love my daughter any less. It means I'm teaching Lily that her well-being matters and that it's okay to protect her space, even from people who mean well but overstep. I feel more confident as a parent now, and I think Lily senses that. She's calmer, happier, and feels secure knowing that her mom has her back no matter what. Diane reached out a week after Christmas with a text saying, "Thank you for letting me see Lily today. I'm proud of you for standing firm. I know it wasn't easy." I didn't respond immediately. I wanted to keep the dynamic healthy, but I appreciated the gesture. It felt like a truce without needing to compromise my boundaries. Jason and I have also found a rhythm in co-parenting that works. We're both communicating better about schedules, visits, and expectations. He even joked the other day, "Next year, I'll make sure Mom's drama stays at bay so you can enjoy the morning uninterrupted." I laughed and said, "Deal." Looking back, I realized this whole ordeal wasn't just about Christmas. It was about teaching all the adults involved, me, Jason, and even Diane, that boundaries are necessary for healthy relationships. It was about showing Lily that family doesn't have to be chaotic to be loving, that love isn't measured by guilt trips or compliance, and that sometimes the best gift you can give a child is peace and consistency. So this year, our Christmas was perfect, not because it followed anyone else's rules or expectations, but because it was ours, cozy, laughter-filled, and free from adult tension. And that, honestly, is everything I ever wanted for Lily. I think Diane understands now, Jason's learning, and I feel proud of myself for staying firm. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. Lily doesn't need a perfect family dinner to be happy. She needs love, security, and boundaries, and for the first time in years, I think we've achieved that. Stories number 11. My weekend job turned into a strange friendship with a wealthy couple that I can't stop thinking about. I never thought my side job would lead to something that felt like stepping into another world. I was 28, broke, and trying to pay off student loans while juggling a full-time job in customer service. On weekends, I picked up catering gigs, weddings, corporate events, and sometimes private dinners. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well enough to keep the lights on and my car from being repossessed. That's how I met Richard and Evelyn. It was a Friday night in late spring, one of those crisp evenings where everything smells like blooming trees and money. If you're near the right part of town, the event was at their estate, a sprawling property outside of Portland with a long gravel driveway and a house that looked like it belonged on the cover of Architectural Digest. The catering team I worked with was short-staffed that night, so the manager told me I'd be assigned to direct service, meaning I'd be handling their table directly, not just clearing plates. When I first saw them, I thought they looked like a movie couple. Richard was in his early 60s, silver hair, tailored suit, the kind of man who made eye contact like he owned the air between you. Evelyn was a little younger, maybe mid-50s, elegant in a soft blue dress, with a calm smile that could disarm anyone. They were hosting a small dinner for about 10 people. Friends, business partners, maybe a senator, the kind of crowd that talks about private schools and art auctions like they're just errands. Halfway through the evening, while I was refilling glasses, Evelyn looked at me and said, "You have such a polite way about you. Are you in school?" I told her no. I'd graduated a few years back but was paying off loans. So I picked up catering shifts on the side. Richard asked what I studied. When I said communications, he chuckled softly and said, "Ah, the art of saying everything without saying anything. You do well in politics." That got a laugh from the table, but there was something about the way he said it that made me feel like he meant it. Later, when most of the guests were outside on the patio drinking, Evelyn called me over again. "You remind me of our son," she said quietly. "He's about your age. We haven't spoken to him in a while." I smiled politely, not sure how to respond. I'd had guests overshare before, usually about their kids, divorces or real estate, but this felt heavier. She didn't elaborate, and I didn't ask. At the end of the night, As we were cleaning up, she came over again and pressed a folded bill into my hand. It was $100. "Thank you for being so kind tonight," she said. "You have a calm presence. That's rare." I didn't think much of it until 2 weeks later when my manager told me, "The Whitmores requested you again. Apparently, they were hosting another private dinner and had specifically asked for me by name." That second night felt different. The event was smaller, just the two of them and another couple. Evelyn seemed more relaxed, and Richard kept including me in small talk, asking about my life, where I grew up, whether I liked living in the city. It felt strange, being part of the conversation while still wearing a uniform and carrying plates, but they didn't make it feel patronizing. At the end of the evening, Richard said, "You know, if you ever want something more stable, I could find a place for you in one of my companies." I laughed it off, thinking he was just being polite. But a week later, Evelyn called the catering company directly and asked if they could give me her number. When I called, she said, "Richard and I were serious. We'd love to talk to you about an opportunity. Would you come by for coffee this weekend?" Part of me thought it was ridiculous, but curiosity and, let's be honest, financial desperation won that Saturday. I drove up to their estate again. Evelyn greeted me at the door in a linen dress, barefoot, like someone in a lifestyle magazine. She led me to a sunroom overlooking the garden, where Richard was reading the paper. We talked for over an hour. He explained that he ran a few small investment firms and a property development company. "I could use a communications coordinator," he said. "Someone who can handle people, manage correspondence, that kind of thing." He offered me a salary that was almost double what I made at my full-time job. I remember stammering, saying, "That's incredibly generous, why me?" Evelyn smiled and said, "Because you remind us of what our son could have been. If things had gone differently." That line made my stomach twist, but I accepted the offer anyway. Working for them felt like stepping into a different reality. Their office was inside their home, tucked behind the library. I handled emails, coordinated meetings, and sometimes drove into the city to deliver documents or pick up clients. They treated me well, paid on time, fed me lunch, sometimes even invited me to sit with them afterward for a drink. They started asking more personal questions. Richard wanted to know about my family. I told him my parents lived in Michigan, that I didn't visit much because flights were expensive. Evelyn asked if I had a girlfriend. When I said no, she said, "You're far too kind to be alone." They began giving me small gifts. First a tie, then a watch. Richard said, "A man should always have a good timepiece." It was flattering, but also unsettling. There was always this unspoken sadness around them, like they were trying to fill a hole I couldn't see. About 2 months in, I asked my coworker, Marcy, if she knew anything about the Whitmore's son. She raised an eyebrow and said, "You don't know? He died 5 years ago." I felt my stomach drop. She said he'd been in a car accident, single vehicle. Late at night, the family rarely spoke about it. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Evelyn's voice in my head. "You remind us of our son." The next morning, I went into work and noticed something new. On the piano in their sitting room, there was a framed photo I hadn't seen before. A young man, smiling in a graduation gown. He looked a little like me, same dark hair, similar build, even the same dimple on one cheek. When Evelyn caught me looking, she said quietly, "His name was Daniel." After that, things changed subtly. Evelyn started asking me to stay for dinner more often. She'd tell me stories about Daniel, how he loved hiking, how he once got lost in Italy and called her crying from a payphone. I listened, trying to be polite, but every story felt heavier. Sometimes she'd tear up mid-sentence and just look at me for a little too long. Richard, meanwhile, started calling me kid. He'd clap me on the shoulder when I walked in, pour me a glass of whiskey on Fridays, and talk about mentoring me. It wasn't inappropriate, it was almost paternal. But there was something uncomfortably blurred about it. One evening after dinner, Evelyn said, "You know, if you ever need a place to stay, we have plenty of room here." I laughed it off. But she wasn't joking. "You work so hard," she said softly. "We'd love to have you here, even just on weekends. It would be nice to have someone around." I didn't know what to say. Over the next few weeks, I noticed her calling me more often. Sometimes just to chat, she'd ask if I'd eaten, how my day was going, whether I was lonely. It felt caring, but also strange. Then one night, Richard invited me out for dinner at a country club. Just the two of us. He said he wanted to talk business. We sat at this pristine white tablecloth restaurant surrounded by men in golf jackets. Halfway through the meal, he leaned in and said, "You've been good for Evelyn." She's been smiling again. I said I was glad to help, but he shook his head. No, you don't understand. You've filled a void for her, for both of us, really. He paused, then said something I'll never forget. You're like a son to us. I smiled awkwardly, not knowing what to say. Then he said, we've been thinking. We want to help you get ahead. Really ahead. He told me they'd set aside some money for Daniel's future that they never used. We'd like to invest it in you, he said. Pay off your debt, help you buy a place, we can call it a scholarship of sorts. I froze. I told him I couldn't accept that. It didn't feel right, but he insisted. It would mean a lot to Evelyn. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, torn between gratitude and unease. Was this generosity, or grief wearing generosity's mask? The next morning, Evelyn called, her voice trembling. Richard told me what he offered. Please, let us do this. We'd love to see you start fresh. It would make us happy. I didn't know how to refuse without hurting them, but something deep in my gut told me that if I said yes, I'd never fully get out. So I did something that broke my heart a little. I quit. I told them I'd been offered another position in the city, a lie, and that I needed to move on. Evelyn cried when I told her. Richard tried to convince me to stay, but when I stood firm, he just nodded. You're a good man, he said. Our son would have liked you. I left that day with a strange ache in my chest. A few months later, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten, in Evelyn's elegant cursive. It said, You reminded us that kindness still exists in the world. Thank you for giving us something we hadn't felt in years. Peace. Please don't feel guilty for moving on. It's what Daniel would have wanted. There was no check, no offer, just that letter. I still keep it in a drawer. Sometimes when I think about them, I feel a mix of gratitude and sorrow. They weren't bad people. They were just lost in their grief, trying to rebuild their son from the pieces they saw in me. And in a strange way, I think they did help me. Not with money, not with connections, but by showing me what loneliness can do when it's left to grow unchecked. I still do catering sometimes, though not as often, whenever I serve couples who look at each other the way Richard and Evelyn did. Half love, half memory. I wonder if they ever found peace after I left. I hope they did, because in some quiet corner of my heart, I'll always be their almost son. Update: it's been about 3 years since I left the Whitmore's estate. Life moved fast after that. I changed jobs, moved into a small apartment of my own, and eventually started a marketing consulting business on the side. I still remember their estate vividly. The long driveway, the smell of blooming trees, the quiet weight of their grief in every room. For a long time, I avoided thinking about them too much because the memory was a mix of warmth and unease. Then, out of the blue, I got an email from Evelyn. She was polite, careful, and slightly hesitant in tone. She wrote, Hello, Alex. I hope this email finds you well. Richard and I often think about you and wonder how you're doing. We'd love to invite you to visit us for dinner. No obligations. Just a meal with old friends. We'd understand if you're not comfortable, but we would be glad to see you again. I reread the email 3 times before I even dared to respond. Part of me was nervous. What if they expected something from me again? What if going back reopened the weird dynamic I'd worked so hard to leave behind? But another part of me was genuinely curious. I hadn't thought of them as friends back then. But maybe, after all this time, they could be, I agreed. Driving up to the estate again, I felt a flash of nostalgia and nerves. The house looked mostly the same, though the garden seemed fuller. More vibrant. Evelyn greeted me at the door. She was smiling, but it was calmer this time, less sad. Richard appeared behind her, taller than I remembered, though older, with that same quiet confidence. We settled into the sunroom again. The same one where we'd talked for hours 3 years ago. The first hour was mostly catching up. How I'd moved, my consulting business, Richard's small firm, Evelyn's art shows. It felt natural, surprisingly easy. Then, as we finished dessert, Evelyn's tone softened. Alex, I wanted to tell you something, she said. You helped us heal more than you could have imagined. After you left, Richard and I started going to therapy. We learned to face Daniel's death together instead of trying to replace him in someone else. We talk about him now without crying every day. I felt a lump in my throat. I hadn't realized how much their grief had spilled over onto me. I'm really glad, I said softly. Richard nodded. And I want you to know, Alex, that when we offered you that money before, it wasn't just generosity. It was us fumbling through our grief. We were trying to honor Daniel in the only way we knew how, but stepping back taught us how to actually honor him without projecting onto someone else. That lesson? It's priceless. We spent the rest of the evening sharing stories. Some funny, some tender. Evelyn talked about Daniel's love for jazz, how he once tried to teach the dog to fetch a newspaper and failed spectacularly. Richard shared memories from Daniel's high school years, showing a photo of him in a graduation cap. It felt different from before. No unspoken tension, no expectation, no blurred lines. They didn't need me to fill a role. They just wanted to share memories and reconnect with someone who reminded them of the joy their son had brought them. Before I left, Evelyn gave me a small box. Inside was a framed photo of Daniel as a teenager, smiling broadly at a summer camp. There was a note tucked behind it. For you, Alex. Thank you for helping us remember him without losing ourselves. We hope you're happy and thriving. Driving home, I thought about how surreal the journey had been. From a catering job that felt routine, to an intense, complicated bond with a grieving family, and now to a place of closure and genuine friendship. Reflecting on those 3 years, I realized how much the experience shaped me, how I approach people, grief, and boundaries. I learned that generosity, even when flawed, can carry deep meaning. I learned that grief is complicated, and that people sometimes reach out in ways that blur lines, not because they're bad, but because they're hurting. And I learned that compassion doesn't mean sacrificing yourself. It means being kind while protecting your own boundaries. Sometimes I think about Richard and Evelyn and smile. We check in occasionally now, emails mostly, sometimes calls. And though I'll never be Daniel, I understand now that I never needed to be. Their love for their son was always theirs to hold. My part was simply being present, listening, and being human. That chapter feels closed in the best way, like a difficult, strange, but ultimately meaningful story I get to carry with me. And honestly, I wouldn't trade it for anything. Final update. It's been nearly 5 years since I first stepped onto the Whitmore's estate, and sometimes I still find myself thinking about that weekend job and how it led me into a world I could never have imagined. At first, it felt surreal, like I'd wandered into someone else's life by accident. But over time, it became something much deeper, teaching me lessons I didn't even know I needed. After that second dinner where Evelyn and Richard invited me into their home as more than just a server, I made the decision to step back from them. I had accepted their offer of mentorship and financial assistance internally, but I knew deep down that accepting it fully would have trapped me in a role I wasn't ready to play. It was one thing to help them heal, and another to become a substitute for someone they lost. So I quietly declined their generous gestures and built my life independently. That decision was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I knew it would disappoint them, and I also knew I might never experience such an opportunity again. But it was the right choice. In the years that followed, I started my own small consulting firm, handling communications and marketing for local businesses. The lessons I learned from working closely with the Whitmores, listening carefully, understanding what people need without taking on their burdens, observing without judgment, were invaluable. My business grew slowly but steadily, and I realized that confidence comes not just from financial success, but from the courage to set boundaries and make decisions that feel right. Evelyn and Richard remained in my life, but in a healthier, balanced way. We spoke by email a few times a year, sometimes sharing updates, sometimes just sending holiday greetings. They never tried to pull me back into the dynamic of son replacement, and I respected that. When we did meet, it was light, warm, and genuinely enjoyable. I saw them as friends, mentors in some ways, but never as authority figures or substitutes for family. What struck me most over the years was how their grief had shaped them, and indirectly, how it had shaped me. Grief can be heavy and messy, and in the Whitmore's case, it was so intense that it spilled over into the world around them. I became a mirror, whether I wanted to or not. But through that, I learned compassion in a new way. I learned how to honor someone else's pain while maintaining my own autonomy. I learned that generosity can sometimes be complicated, but it's still valuable. I learned that boundaries are not barriers. They're acts of self-respect that ultimately make relationships healthier. Sometimes I think back to the first night, when Evelyn told me, "You remind us of our son." At the time, it felt strange, almost unreal. Over time, I realized it wasn't about me. It was about their love and loss, their desire to connect with someone who reflected the joy they had lost. And in a way, I came to cherish that trust they placed in me. I was never a replacement, but I was allowed into a private, sacred part of their lives. That alone was an incredible gift. A few years after that, I finally met someone I could see a long-term future with. Michael, a kind, thoughtful man who made me laugh and never tried to change me. He didn't need me to be someone else. He valued me for who I was. Meeting him made me realize just how much my experiences with the Whitmores had prepared me to recognize and cultivate healthy relationships. I knew how to listen, how to respect grief and space, how to assert myself without guilt. And that made all the difference in how I connected with him. The last time I saw the Whitmores in person was a couple of years ago at a garden party they hosted for friends. Richard waved when I arrived. Evelyn hugged me tightly, and for the first time I felt no tension, no obligation, just genuine affection and warmth. They've aged gracefully, slower now, with a quiet ease that comes from finally confronting loss rather than trying to replace it. I felt proud of them, proud of myself, and strangely grateful that I had been a small part of their journey without losing my own. Reflecting on everything, I realized that weekend job, that strange first encounter, and that uncomfortable, heart-wrenching proximity to grief changed the course of my life. It taught me resilience, empathy, and the importance of boundaries. It gave me tools I never could have learned in school or a traditional job. Most importantly, it reminded me that even when people's intentions are mixed, like grief, love, and longing intertwined, they can still offer opportunities for connection, growth, and understanding. Sometimes I walk past the old estate when I'm driving through Portland. The gates are slightly rusted, the trees taller, the gravel driveway quieter. I smile to myself, thinking about what that house, those people, and that experience taught me. That life is complicated, that grief is real, and that kindness, when genuine, is transformative, even in unexpected ways, and I know this for certain. I will carry that strange, beautiful, unreal chapter of my life with me forever. Stories number 12. My sister's fiance broke my $900 saw and got mad when I told him he can't borrow my tools anymore. I've always been the kind of person who takes care of their stuff. My dad was a contractor, so I grew up around tools and learned early that if you respect them, they'll last a lifetime. Over the years, I've built a small but high-quality collection. Some inherited, some bought with my own money. I'm not a professional, but I do woodworking and home improvement projects as a serious hobby. It's also kind of my stress relief after long workdays. My younger sister, Emily, recently got engaged to a guy named Brian. At first, he seemed great, friendly, outgoing, a little too confident sometimes, but harmless. He's one of those people who thinks he can do anything if he just figures it out. That attitude's fine when you're experimenting with cooking or video games, but not when you're dealing with expensive power tools. A few months ago, Brian asked to borrow my table saw. It's a $900 DeWalt model I'd saved up for and treated like a baby. I hesitated but said okay, as long as he was careful and didn't try anything fancy with it. I even offered to come over and help with whatever project he was working on, but he waved me off. Nah, man, I've got it. I used to help my uncle with stuff like this all the time. Big mistake. 2 days later, I got a call from Emily. She sounded weirdly calm, which made me nervous. She said, "Hey, don't be mad, but Brian had a little accident with your saw." I asked what kind of accident, and she said, "It still works, just not like before." That's when I drove over. When I got there, the saw looked like it had gone through war. The blade was warped, the fence was bent, and the motor casing had a huge crack. Turns out Brian tried cutting through a metal pipe. Not realizing it wasn't PVC, the blade caught, the motor kicked, and he ended up nearly breaking his wrist. He was lucky he didn't lose a hand. I stood there in shock for a good 30 seconds, just staring at the mess. Then I asked, "Why didn't you stop when it started sparking?" He shrugged and said, "I thought it was just friction. My uncle's old saw used to do that. I had to step outside to keep from yelling." After a long pause, I told him flatly, "You're not using my tools again, ever." He looked offended, like I'd just insulted his character. "Dude, it was an accident. I'll help fix it." "You can't fix this," I said. "You don't even know what you broke." He rolled his eyes and said, "Come on, it's not that deep, it's just a saw." Emily jumped in and said, "Brian, stop. It's his stuff. You should have been more careful." That was the first time I'd seen her look genuinely irritated at him. Still, the damage was done. I ended up sending the saw to a repair shop. The guy looked at it and said the motor was toast, and replacement parts would cost almost as much as buying a new one. I told Brian and he said, "Damn, that sucks. Maybe you can find one used online?" That was it. No offer to pay, no apology beyond a lazy, "Sorry." Man, I bought a new saw 2 weeks later, but the resentment lingered. I didn't bring it up again until a few weeks ago, when Brian asked if he could borrow my miter saw for a trim job at their house. I laughed, thinking he was joking, but he said, "No, seriously. I'll be careful this time," I said. "No, you won't. You said that last time." He frowned. "You're seriously not gonna let me borrow it? One mistake and I'm banned for life?" I said, "It's not one mistake, Brian. It's a $900 mistake you didn't take responsibility for." That turned into an argument. Emily tried to calm things down, but he stormed out muttering something about people being selfish with their toys. Later that night, Emily called and asked me to just let it go, because Brian feels embarrassed and guilty enough already. I told her, if he actually felt guilty, he'd have paid for what he broke. She sighed and said, "He's been under a lot of stress. He didn't mean to mess it up," I said. "Intent doesn't replace accountability." She hung up shortly after, clearly frustrated. Since then, things between us have been awkward. I haven't been invited to a few family dinners where Brian's around. My mom told me Emily said I was making things uncomfortable and holding a grudge. For context, Emily and I used to be close. I helped her move into her first apartment, fixed her shelves, even helped renovate part of their new house before they moved in. But ever since Brian came along, she started picking up his "it's not that big of a deal" attitude about everything. I thought maybe time would cool things off, but Brian keeps acting like I'm the unreasonable one. Last weekend, during a barbecue at my parents' place, he made a snide comment while I was grilling. "Hey, don't worry, I won't touch your precious tools." Then he laughed. I just looked at him and said, "Good, because you've already proven you shouldn't." The table went silent. Emily told him to stop, but he got defensive again, saying I still haven't gotten over one stupid accident. I told him, breaking something expensive and not taking responsibility for it isn't a stupid accident. It's immaturity. He muttered something about me being uptight and walked away. After that, Emily texted me later saying I humiliated him in front of everyone and should apologize for making things worse. I told her I'm done pretending his behavior is fine. If he wants to act like a grown man, he can start by acting accountable. I haven't spoken to either of them since. My parents think I could have let it go for the sake of peace. But my dad, the one who taught me how to use tools in the first place, told me quietly, "You did the right thing. Respect matters more than being liked." It's weird. Though, I'm not even that mad about the saw anymore. What really gets me is the total lack of respect for my property, for my time, and for the effort it takes to earn and maintain something. It's not about money at this point. It's about principle. I'm sure Brian thinks I'm being dramatic, but honestly, I think not everyone deserves access to what you've worked hard for. Sometimes protecting your boundaries looks petty from the outside. But for me, it's just common sense. If that means a little family tension, so be it. It's been about 2 months since the saw incident, and things have definitely escalated in subtle but stressful ways. I thought the initial tension would fade after Emily and I cooled off a bit, but instead, it feels like every interaction with Brian reminds me why I drew that boundary in the first place. Since that barbecue, he's made little passive-aggressive remarks every time I'm around tools. At my parents' place last weekend, he pointed at my new drill and said, "Careful, that one's probably too expensive for me too." I didn't answer. I just set it down and walked away. Emily rolled her eyes at me afterward, whispering, "You're making a mountain out of a molehill." I wanted to scream. It isn't a molehill. It's respect, which apparently Brian doesn't understand. A few weeks ago, I had a project in my garage, a custom bookshelf I'd been planning for months. Brian offered to help, and I told him flat out no. Emily texted me afterward, pleading with me. Please just let him help. It'll make him feel included. I ignored the message. I've spent years honing my skills and protecting my tools. Letting him loose again isn't including him. It's asking for trouble. It got worse when Brian tried to guilt-trip me in front of my parents. We were all having Sunday lunch at my mom's, and he said, "I guess some people just can't forgive a mistake. Marissa's holding a grudge over a saw." He laughed, expecting everyone to side with him. My dad's eyebrow raised so high I thought it would hit the ceiling. I calmly replied, "It wasn't just a saw. It was disrespect and carelessness. You showed no responsibility. So the tools aren't available to you. That's not holding a grudge. That's setting a boundary." My mom tried to intervene, saying, "Can't you let it go for family harmony?" I just shook my head. Harmony without respect is meaningless. My dad whispered to me later, "You're not wrong. He needed a lesson." Emily hasn't stopped trying to mediate, though. She keeps texting me things like, "Brian just wants to learn from you," or, "You're making things awkward for the wedding planning." I understand her point. Brian is her fiancé. But I can't compromise on my stuff. The more she pushes, the more it reinforces my stance. Brian even tried another move, borrowing smaller tools like my jigsaw and sander. Pretending he wouldn't cause damage this time, I had to shut that down immediately. He argued that he knows how to handle a jigsaw. But I told him bluntly that it's not about competence. It's about trust. And he broke that trust. He stormed out again, muttering about how uptight I am. Emily called me afterward and said, "You're being ridiculous. You're turning into your dad when it comes to tools." I laughed a little because it's true. My dad always made it clear you respect your equipment. But I didn't budge. The situation has forced a bigger conversation between Emily and me about boundaries. She's slowly realizing that just because someone is family or close to her doesn't mean I owe them unlimited access to my possessions. Brian's accident wasn't just an accident. It revealed his pattern of assuming he can take liberties without consequence. I also realized I need to keep my garage and workshop spaces strictly off limits unless someone has earned my trust. It's not being petty. It's self-preservation. These tools aren't just objects. They're years of learning, sweat, and patience. Brian hasn't apologized properly. And at this point, I don't even expect one. I'm not interested in reconciliation about this. My sister, on the other hand, is slowly starting to understand that enforcing boundaries isn't the same as being hostile. She's even started reminding Brian to respect my space, which is a relief for now. I've decided to keep my doors locked when I'm not around, and to stop engaging in debates about this with Brian. Any attempt he makes to borrow tools is met with a simple, calm refusal. He can stew, pout, or complain all he wants. I'm done negotiating respect. I don't feel guilty about this anymore. I've realized that protecting what you've worked hard for and setting boundaries isn't selfish. Brian's continued behavior has reinforced that lesson repeatedly. If anything, this experience has made me more confident in defending my space, my tools, and my time. The wedding planning is ongoing, and I expect tension will continue until Brian fully grasps the concept of personal responsibility. But at least I'm no longer the one bending. It's been nearly 6 months since the original saw incident, and things have finally settled into a new normal. Though, settled doesn't mean easy. Over time, the tension between Brian, Emily, and me has softened. But boundaries are still being tested occasionally, and I've learned a lot about holding firm without burning bridges. After the first few months of outright friction, Emily started to respect my decision more. She stopped pressuring me to let Brian help, and instead started relaying messages like, "Brian's asking about borrowing a tool. What's your rule?" That simple shift made a huge difference. She wasn't defending me or him. She was just acting as a neutral party, and it helped prevent awkward confrontations. Brian, on the other hand, hasn't really changed much in attitude, but he has learned that I mean what I say. A few weeks ago, he asked to borrow my cordless drill for a shelf project. I calmly said no, and instead offered to show him how to use his own cheap drill more efficiently. He grumbled a bit but took the advice, and later, I saw a picture Emily sent me of the shelf. It actually looked decent. No broken tools, no drama. That small success felt like a turning point. He started realizing that he can still accomplish projects without touching my tools. And maybe that's how he's learning accountability. We had another minor flare-up at a family barbecue last month. Brian made a joke about me being tool police while I was setting up my woodworking table to show my nephew how to make a birdhouse. Everyone laughed, including Emily, but I just smiled and continued working. No argument, no yelling. I think he realized he wasn't going to get a reaction out of me anymore. And that alone diffused the situation. The biggest breakthrough came a few weeks ago when Emily and Brian were planning their engagement party. They wanted me to help with decorations, furniture setup, and general prep. Instead of letting Brian handle power tools, I only allowed him to do light lifting and assembling pre-drilled furniture. Surprisingly, he didn't push back. I even caught him thanking me quietly for showing him some shortcuts with basic hand tools. For the first time, I felt like we had reached a level of mutual understanding. Meanwhile, I've been keeping my personal workshop strictly off limits unless I'm supervising or the person has earned trust. That's been the key to maintaining my sanity. I've realized that my tools aren't just expensive. They're symbols of my independence and my dedication to craftsmanship. Letting someone misuse them isn't just careless. It's a violation of that work. Emily has been supportive of this new arrangement. And she's even started helping Brian respect boundaries in small ways. Like reminding him not to ask to borrow power tools unless I explicitly say yes. She's slowly learning that standing up for boundaries isn't being difficult. It's about respect. Brian's attitude hasn't magically transformed. But he's learned to pick his battles. I no longer need to engage every time he makes a joke about my tools or tries to push limits. I let my consistent boundaries do the talking. And for the first time, he's responding. Sometimes with awkward acceptance. Sometimes with silence. But always without defiance. I also feel like this situation has strengthened my relationship with Emily in a strange way. We've had to navigate tension, defend each other's positions, and communicate honestly. We've realized that our sibling bond doesn't have to be compromised by someone else's immaturity. It just takes patience, honesty, and sometimes firm enforcement of personal rules. In the end, I've learned that it's possible to enforce boundaries without escalating conflict endlessly. Brian still has his personality quirks, and I don't expect him to become a woodworking guru overnight. But he now understands that respect is not optional, that accountability matters, and that I will not compromise my tools or my principles for the sake of appeasing him. I've even gone back to spending more time in my workshop, without anxiety about Brian accidentally showing up uninvited. It feels like reclaiming my space and my peace. And while the wedding planning continues, I feel confident that my boundaries are clear and respected, which makes family gatherings much less stressful. Honestly, I feel proud of how this all turned out. I didn't give in, and I didn't burn bridges. I just insisted on respect and accountability. Brian has learned he can't take shortcuts with other people's property. Emily has learned to mediate fairly, and I've learned that standing firm doesn't make you selfish. It makes you consistent. I know there will always be minor annoyances when it comes to him, but for the first time, I feel in control of my own space and possessions. And that's a huge relief. The saw incident, as infuriating as it was, ended up teaching all of us something valuable. Mostly about respect, boundaries, and taking responsibility for your mistakes. Now, when I step into my workshop, I feel calm, confident, and ready to create again, without the shadow of someone else's carelessness looming over me. And honestly, that feels like a victory in itself.